Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Attendance at the beginning of the meeting is 100% with, I think, everyone in chambers except for Natalie and I. Is that correct? Awesome. All right. So because I'm chairing virtually, I appreciate you guys logging into the Zoom. I see Ken's already got his hand up, so we'll use hands up to get in line to ask questions or make motions, and then we'll use our check mark buttons for voting purposes, which I'll have to remind myself where they are, but I'll do that in a minute. So Ken, go ahead. You have your hand up.
I'm just gonna read in the motion to adopt the agenda. Is that all right?
Absolutely, go ahead.
That the December 3rd, 2024 agenda be adopted as presented.
Perfect. Okay, I'll call for the vote. Just waiting for Ken.
And I'm raising hands and I'm waving, so that's all I can do.
Okay, so you go into your react button and you'll see it, the check mark, but for now we'll record you as yes, that's unanimous. We have one registered speaker, but that is for the public hearing. Is there any new registered speaker since you emailed me this morning, Ledge?
There are no.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll skip over 4. Consent agenda, there was a couple things removed, but most of it stayed on. So I will ask somebody to make the motion. I'll take my yes down. Go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. The recommendations in the following agenda reports be approved. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes of November 19th, 2024. I have this on here. 9.1, 2025, public appointments to St. Albert civic agencies and quasi-judicial boards. 10.1, local growth and sustainability grant, and 10.2, FCM grant, natural asset management.
Awesome. All right, call for the vote on that one.
Yeah.
And that's carried unanimously. Okay, take that down. Okay, next thing on our agenda, the public hearing is at 2 o'clock, so that is an hour from now. So we'll go straight to committee business, which is the quarterly policing update. Ken, is anyone in the gallery? I didn't know if the policing committee was coming, or is Dwayne there?
No, Dwayne, Staff Sergeant Morris here.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I should be more professional. Staff Sergeant, so is, I'll turn the meeting over to you and we'll get our quarterly update for Q2 of 24.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. So I guess, yeah, just for the record, it's Staff Sergeant Dwayne Moore, just the acting officer in charge here in St. Albert. So I'll just start off with a review, kind of our Q2 report. And if there's any questions, I can take those either as we go along or at the end, whatever works. So I know that it's been in the media and you may or may not have seen it, but we will be starting the rollout of the body worn cameras for the RCMP, but that's going to be national, so right across the entire country. However, everybody will have their own program that's running within their within the province. So due to just the large scale of the number of cameras that are going to have to be rolled out, they are looking at this at being a 12 to 18 month deployment. We're anticipating that the cameras for St. Albert will probably be in place probably more towards the end of 2025. And the reason for the date of that, I would like to get them in place tomorrow if I could. So it's not that we don't want them. We actually do want them in place. It's that that kind of rolls in with the renovations that are being that are happening at the 2 locations that we're currently in. So if we went too early, we would be kind of duplicating efforts where the drops and all the hardware would have to be put in. We'd have to redo that again once the renos were done. So we'd be kind of wasting time and money. So the plan is to integrate that with the renovations, and so I'll be working closely with Aaron and with the RCMP on that side. So when we're ready for them, as soon as we can, we'll get those rolled out. Along with that, well, there was a little bit of press release that came out, you know, back in November when we started this. There will be additional information that will be being put out at a local level once those cameras do start rolling out, so that the people, we'll say in St. Albert, are fully aware of who's wearing those cameras, what they entail, when they'll be on, when they won't be on, all those type of things. And so more information will be coming along as those cameras start rolling out to the particular locations across Alberta and Canada. The other thing is that the RCMP is going to be putting out in 2025 a public consultation tool. That's to be launched at some point in 2025. And we look forward to that. That's so that we can, another tool that can be used in order to solicit feedback from our stakeholders with the goal of increasing transparency in policing and to contribute to our vision of becoming an inherent open RCMP. I know that through the local policing committee here, we already have a system that's in place there now, and that's probably going to be very similar. There is so that on an annual basis, we're able to solicit feedback from the public in general through a survey system, and that currently is open there right now because our fiscal year goes from April the 1st to March the 31st. I'll be reviewing a few of the priorities based off the information we received last year. Come February, March, I'll be putting the new priorities in place. These priorities are determined based off the information that I received from people like yourselves, the policing committee, the community in general, to find out what priorities are important to the city of St. Albert. So there is a system in place, like I said, through the policing committee and that online survey. There will be another one that's coming more from the RCMP at a higher level there. But I think that we're already well situated in order to obtain that information. The policing committee is doing an excellent job, I feel, in getting out there and interacting with the public at different events and stuff, something that may not have been happening on a regular basis in the past. So this is just another way of obtaining information from the public. I'm just going to touch on the 3 priorities and then a little bit of the stats. I won't go into that too much. And then kind of on our, I guess, the staffing levels that we have at the detachment. So there are 3 priorities. These were set up in place before I arrived here in September. So the first one is going to be crime reduction. And this will just be a review for second quarter of this year, which runs from July to September. So the crime reduction unit conducted undercover operations during this time frame that resulted in the recovery of stolen tools taken from a construction site, that in of itself triggered a further intelligence sharing with Edmonton police partners, which ultimately resulted in the search warrant at the same target's property and led to the recovery of additional stolen property from 2 separate St. Albert theft files. The crime reduction unit that we have here in St. Albert also recovered a stolen vehicle, arrested 2 subjects for possession. And during the search of the vehicle, stolen property was recovered from at least 2 additional files, including a theft of another business vehicle and trailer, and that contained $90,000 of new sporting equipment. So you can see from just, working with our partners here, the criminals know no boundaries, so neither can we. We may just be looking at the city of St. Albert, but all of this is linked through to the rural areas, also through Edmonton Police. So we work closely with other RCMP detachment, as well as our partners with the Edmonton Police. And in collaboration, we're able to have a positive effect on putting these criminals behind bars. Also during the second quarter, we did more than 91 compliance checks that were completed, and charges were laid against 2 offenders for breaching their conditions. So these would be offenders that are on some type of conditions. They tend to be especially like curfew type conditions. So they would have been arrested, charged, released. If they're on a curfew, for them just not being in their residence during that particular time frame that's listed, that would be a criminal offense. The fact that they can't follow simple rules and directions like just stay in your residence, it makes it an easy one for us in order to lay charges. The more we go through that process, they just keep on building up those charges. We may not get them for whatever they were doing when they're outside that residence, but we are able to lay those criminal charges for a breach. So that's very beneficial. So we do keep an eye out on those, what we refer to as like a prolific offender that's responsible for a large number of the crimes that tend to take place in any of the communities throughout Alberta. And then our crime prevention unit, they also conducted patrols in golf carts and bikes, especially over the summertime, due to some of the youth crime activity. that was taking place. We kind of zoned in on like school zones and local hangouts that were populated by the youth. So that was helpful as well. The second priority that we had is mental health in vulnerable communities. So Q2 members were involved with Stuff a Cruiser for the food banks. There was 4 of those events that were held. That brought in just under 3,000 pounds of food and a little over $160 in donations. Gave presentations to transition clients in relation to personal safety and frauds and scams. CPVS also met with City St. Albert employees to assist in development of a hate crimes information on the city website. CPVS engaged with stakeholders throughout Q2, including events, meetings, presentations, such as summer bike camp presentations, summer camp talks, daycare presentations, and then school presentations as well. Also during that time frame, we had 4 of our members that attended the Belrose Hardcore Adventure Race and engaging with the students and the staff there. So that went very well. That was very well received. The other thing that happened during this time frame is that the Central Alberta Regional Victim Service Society to transition to a new model that transitioned over to a provincial system in St. Albert. That transition has gone extremely well. Of the 3 full-time positions we have, 2 are still staffed. We're working on the 3rd one in order to fill that, and that should be done fairly soon. The advocates are just getting through the process in order to get the proper clearances and stuff so that they can start responding to calls for service there in the victim services side. But the model that was put in place here is was an easy transition over to the provincial system. So that's gone extremely well. And then the 3rd priority we have is domestic violence and assaults. Domestic Violence Committee meeting discussed changes, concerns, trends in each of the participating agencies. During this month, the Family Violence Awareness Month was November. I shouldn't say this month, previous month. And we were involved with Jesse's House FCSS as well. We were also involved along with the city for the Purple Bench Initiative that was in support of community awareness around domestic violence. And we had the unveiling of that, the bench in the park here in November. That was very well attended. For those who aren't aware of it, that the bench there is purple in color as it represents domestic violence. It's a beautiful area, nice seating area. People can rest, relax. There's also some information that's going to be on there that basically it's permanently embedded within that chair. And that'll give the information. So for anybody who happens to be, need the information for domestic violence and who to reach out to, there will be contact information on that. So that's, I think that's an excellent for both ourselves and the city to be involved in that. So I appreciate that from the city of St. Albert. Domestic violence unit continues to be involved with Saffron Center, which offers compassionate counseling, preventative education, and specialized police and court advocacy for those involved with sexual violence. There is the potential, I guess, for one of these to open in St. Albert, so we're continue to work towards that. A list of valuable resources sent out to all the members, police officers, for people in need of community supports for all gender-based violence, so that our members are better suited in order to be providing that information as and when needed. And then, I guess the victim services once again, that transition over as I already spoke to. The next thing that I have on my list there is just going to be the stats. So from July to September, all of the numbers are trending in the right direction. They're all going down. So that's positive. You would have that information in front of you. If there's any specific questions on statistics, I can do my best to either answer those questions now, or if I don't have those answers, then I can always try and obtain that information and follow up with you later. But once again, the statistics are going in the right direction. I think that's probably kind of rolls into the next part of my presentation here, which is just talking about the human resources that we have and the staffing levels that we have for the St. Albert detachment. I was here for a short period of time last year from September to December for a few months. And I can speak to that at that time, we were fairly short on resources, requiring a significant amount of overtime in order to fill those shifts. Since that time, it sounds like that staffing has been very generous to the detachment there and able to fill a number of those positions. So whether that be on our plainclothes units, our crime reduction units, drug units, our general investigation section, they're all fully staffed. And then we also have our CPVS, Crime Prevention Victim Services, fully staffed, and I'm working now towards trying to fill up the traffic position. So, excuse me, most of those positions are filled. We're doing much better than we were in the past, and even on the general duty side, the number of positions that have been filled, especially since September, have been very beneficial. So the more police officers we have out there responding to crime, excuse me, and trying to be proactive. I look at these plainclothes units as being more of our proactive. The more work they do and the harder they work at preventing the crime, the less crime there is for our general duty members to have to respond to calls for services, which in turn allows them to be out there and be more proactive, whether it's just through visibility, traffic stops, especially this time of year, check stops, those type of initiatives there. So in the school areas as well. So the staffing numbers are going up, and I continue to work with our staffing in order to fill those positions. And I know last year having those 5 positions that were added here with the approval of council has been extremely helpful in order to help us get to the level of staffing that we need. The last thing I just wanted to touch base on was just going to be, and we worked, with the policing committee there in order to try and get the information out there. So it all has to do, lots with communications and making sure that the public is informed as to what's taking place. Lots of times the RCMP will have our, the Twitter accounts and the Facebook and the Instagram and all those things, but that tends to be at a much, larger scale, whether that be provincial or national, those type of things. But we're trying to implement systems whereby we're able to get out more of the local news so that, if you're in St. Albert or any of the other communities within Alberta, you'd be able to receive local news from the RCMP that's going to be more relevant to you on a day-to-day basis. So there's this RAVE alert mass notification system that can be used for multiple different things. It's a system, and I can put that out and provide it to you there as well. So maybe you can get onto the the police committee's pushing it, but if we can get that out on the St. Albert website, those things. So this is a system that's put in place whereby just scan the QR code, brings you to the appropriate page, and then you can sign up for an account. Very simple, doesn't take very long, and you can pick and choose what notification or what information you want to receive from anywhere in Alberta. So if you want St. Albert, you can have St. Albert. It'll be texted to you if you choose that way. It can be emailed to you, whatever information we put out there. If you happen to have Summer Cottage, some other place in the province, or you're just interested because you have family members, you just pick and choose which communities you would like to receive information from. We are now pushing out all of our press releases that we put out. When we put that out, it's up to the press to decide what they're going to put online, what they're going to actually report on. We're going to put those through on the RAVE system there as well, so that if you have access to it, you're going to automatically get that information. If there's something going on in a specific neighborhood, if there happens to be extra police in that area for any particular reason, we can put that out there for St. Albert. If we happen to have vehicles that were just recently stolen, those type of things, we can try and get that information out so that the locals have that information. And then the other thing that kind of links into that is what we call a capture system. And that's where people can sign up and just indicate for cameras. So if you have cameras on your homes, your places of business, whatever it happens to be, you can let us know. This is not Big Brother trying to monitor your cameras. This is just a notification system so that it's only certain people, even within the RCMP, have access to that information as to where those cameras are. But when we do have an incident that's taken place and we're looking for possibly it's just another tool for us to try and access that information as quickly as possible. So if we know that at a certain location, something took place, you may not even be aware of it. It could be in your general neighborhood there, but we would now have your information because you volunteered it. You indicate that you have a camera that faces north on this street or south or east or west. And we know that there's possibly some information on that that might be of use to us. You provide your name, your phone number, and then we would be able to reach out to you. Like I said, we do not have access to your cameras. It's just a way of going on there and looking at the map and saying those houses that told us they have cameras or those places of business, that might be fairly helpful in order for us to reach out. And we could do that a lot quicker than we could if we start going and knocking on doors and hoping that you're home and those type of things. But even in business areas where there might be a business that has a camera that faces out the back towards a parking lot or across the street or whatever. So we have that out there as well. So those are the initiatives that we're kind of working on. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to do my best to answer them.
All right, so just so you know, Councillor Mackay just emailed us all the rave alert link, so he's on top of that. Couple of comments and a question for you, Dwayne. In your report, so the agenda item was titled Q2 policing report, but most of this, I think, information was Q3, July 1st to September 30th.
Yeah, I guess that would be, that's the RCMP Q2, that would be your Q3.
Okay, there you go. Good to know. It talks about community consultations, and you said consultation number 1, September 11th, 2024, meeting with elected officials. And my big question was, what is this? But it was just the policing committee. So really, I think what's missing is that communication and consultation outside of council chambers with the people you're talking to right now. Ken is a good representative, and the policing committee does talk to the public, but another great avenue of public knowledge is the council that you're addressing today. So maybe we can work that into future consultations. Just very, very casual, kind of over dinner or something, just so you can kind of hear what we're hearing. And the other thing, more of a question for you. Considering yesterday's announcement from the province on ATEs, we're going to be struggling in St. Albert. Ken's laughing at me already. Because our contractor that we used to help us manage that particular offense of speeding is going to struggle to make a business case, and that we might be out of all ATE sites, not like including school zones constructions, those that are allowed, we might not even be able to do that. So that it's going to fall upon law enforcement you'll never be able to pick up the majority of it. And there's lots of locations you can't because it's not safe for your officers. But what do you have right now? Here's the question. What do you have right now from your complement of RCMP officers in St. Albert that actually can get out and do speed enforcement and traffic related offenses in St. Albert?
Yeah, so we do have a dedicated traffic unit. That unit has been understaffed for a period of time. We are working towards there are additional members that are put in place there. I am working towards filling. There are another 2 additional positions that you probably heard me and maybe Ryan Komanak, the previous inspector, talk about soft vacancies. We had a couple of those positions that were basically being blocked, I'll refer to as, because members being off sick. Those positions now are being freed up here in the very near future. So they'll switch over to what we call a hard vacancy, which now we can staff those positions. So I'll be working closely with staffing in order to fill those positions. And there's a couple of different things that we can do to fill those. I can either do it internally, that requires me moving some members or shuffling members around in order to attempt to fill those, and we just filled one of those positions that way, in which case now staffing works to fill my frontline general duty position. But there could be other members that are already waiting for a transfer somewhere else in this province, and that might be well suited towards a traffic position, and I might be able to get those ones in as well. So I'm working with those. I'm working with the city there with Aaron in order to kind of come up with some other alternatives, and in order to kind of fill that on a short-term basis, in order to make sure that we have the visibility and the traffic enforcement that you want out there on the streets, and especially in, you know, school zones, construction zones, those type of things, just due to the very short notice that you received from the province as to what the new rules were going to be with this automatic traffic enforcement. So we were all caught off kind of off guard as to when that announcement came in late on Friday for it to kick in on Sunday. So we are working with the city in order to try and address those concerns.
Okay, I appreciate that. I felt that the announcement did not help the perception of policing and you know, enforcing the laws of speeding in Alberta. You know, some of the comments made by the minister were, you know, trivial, and I just want you to know that I myself, and I'm sure the rest of council would agree, does respect the choices that you make or help us make for those locations. And yeah, you guys are the experts in how to enforce this, and so we will look to you to come up with plan B, I guess, going into the future. Lots of hands up. I think Shelley, you were up first, and I can't see you, Councillor Hughes. Can you please turn your camera? Thank you. Go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for presenting to us today. The good news is crime's going down, so that's what I saw over the report in general, so I appreciate that. One thing I do have to ask you on page 24, where it's mentioned that you conducted patrols on golf carts and bikes, and at budget time, it made it sound like the bike was a new initiative. You know, that was the understanding, right? That it was a new thing you were doing instead of the cart. So just give me clarification on that, if you could, please.
I believe, and Aaron might be able to address this a little more than I can, but I believe that that would be for your municipal enforcement. So the bikes would be a new initiative and an additional cost for municipal enforcement employees. The bikes were already there for the RCMP. So I'm only speaking in regards to the RCMP, and the additional funding that was being brought before council was going to be for municipal enforcement to be out there on pedal bikes as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think Councillor Mackay, you were next.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the clarification. Actually, I was going to clarify that for Councillor Bermanski. So, I mean, sorry, we're just got some hand signaling here. You actually addressed one of my questions in relation to, as everyone knows in this room, and certainly staff Sergeant Moore knows, traffic enforcement is one of my big pushes. And so I'm glad to see that we potentially have a strategy, because like Mayor Herron's identified, I too share the concerns with the changes in the ATE and potentially the impact that has on our contractor. And we're going to have to maybe look at some other solutions. But I guess what I can do, well, because my question was taken, this past weekend, I saw two members. You're talking about getting out in the community and being more visible. They were actually walking in the mall, handing out stickers. So they were Santa's helpers, actually, close by in the relation to the mall. So that always really adds. I mean, stickers are a lot better than tickets. So I think that's a good initiative, and I just wanted to make sure that I could raise it publicly, as my first question was taken. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I know I was made aware of it, that the members are out there doing it, and that's the thing. We don't always have to be the bad guys that are out there. We have our job to do in that, but anytime that we can have our members out there and interacting with the public, the general public in a positive way, I think that's very beneficial. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate it.
I think I don't know who is next. So Councillor Broadhead, we'll go with you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my issue with Minister Jason's commentary was hardworking Albertans. Only hardworking Albertans speed? I don't know. They break the law? Anyway, we'll leave that. Appreciate your commentary around enforcing the traffic in our community. We don't want people going through our intersections in excess of the posted speed. People tend to get hurt that way. My question is more around, of late, we've heard nationally that the RCMP are being asked to redeploy people around border security. Have you heard any of that in Alberta? And would you be asked to second people for a period of time away from St. Albert? Have you heard any of that?
I think what you're talking about there is this kind of came up just very recently in regards to President-elect Trump, who's going to be coming into power in January, and the fact that he's made indications that there'd be a 25% tariff put on Canada and Mexico if we don't keep up border security. So Prime Minister Trudeau ended up meeting with him last week. Trudeau was supposed to be in Calgary, so he diverted from Calgary over to Florida for that meeting. But I guess to answer your question, I don't see that they would be diverting resources from where we currently are posted, especially in St. Albert. So I can only speak to St. Albert, but I'm sure for, most of the frontline members that we have federal units, and some of those federal units are based in Alberta, but those are bodies that are not being paid for by the province or by a municipality like St. Albert. So it's possible that there's some of those Fed section members might get redeployed on a short-term basis. I don't know that for sure. But I think what they're talking about is probably putting in additional personnel into that, whether that be for RCMP or Border Patrol, and giving the border members that currently are border employees, which are not RCMP, that that's where you'd be going through, whether you go through the international airport or you cross over at the actual border. Those Border Patrol officers are only approved to be working at certain locations, possibly giving them additional powers in order to work more along the border. We do have border enforcement teams within the RCMP. So I guess the long and short of it is that it's possible that those numbers could be bolstered. I just don't see that they're going to be coming from St. Albert. That would be possibly Fed sections within the short term and additional positions if they choose to go that way, or redeployment of some of those federal units to be those bodies to be moved over, but not St. Albert members going.
Okay, fair enough. I was just, long-term plans are one thing, trying to come up with a short-term plan, you kind of go with what you've got, right? So, but I'm hopeful that whatever plan they come up with, we still have our members here in St. Albert. So
For sure.
thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No, good question. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment to say it's really great to hear that victim services transition is working really well. We always hear about the criminals, but we don't hear about the great support that's given to the victims. So I'm very, very pleased to hear that transition went well. Couple of questions. You mentioned the potential for having a permanent sexual violence coordinator in St. Albert. I think we've heard that for a potential as quite a long time. I'm just curious as to what would it take to actually move that forward? Is it numbers or staffing or budget, or do you have a better idea?
And that's something I would have to look into a little closer there with our CPVS unit that would work with those, with our partners. So that isn't going to be specifically an RCMP employee or related there, but that would be one of those partners that happen to have those type of transition houses and those supports, no different than victim services or, different teams like that we would work closely with. So I can look into that and get back to you to see what needs to be done, if there's anything that could be done at the, at the city level in order to push that forward. Or if it just happens to be like that, somebody else is making those decisions that based off of the Edmonton area, they've decided where those supports are gonna be and people that have to go there, but I'll look into that for sure and get back
Yeah,
to you. Okay.
thank you. Don't spend a lot of time on it. It would be good just to get a high
Yep.
level, because
Yep.
it has been a kind of carry forward theme that we've heard over a couple of quarters. The last one was, it seems we had a little bit of a crime spree. Break and enters, people jumping over fences in the backyard just recently, and I don't know if that falls into the quarterly update perfectly, but because it's more recent, but could you speak to, what transpired out of all that? Because there wasn't I think RCMP notification that there was a bit of a spree going on, but I didn't hear, kind of what had happened to close that off.
Yeah, for sure. No, and that wouldn't be part of this quarterly update, just because that just happened recently. That would be the next one. But thanks for bringing that up. So yes, we decided to put out a press release. I mean, it's all a relative to what's happening within the local area. The number of break and enters, they did spike here compared to what we would normally have seen. Not some other location within Alberta. That may not even been in, that might have been just a regular occurrence on a Friday or Saturday or whatever. But here, the numbers did go up over a couple of weekends. So that's why we decided that we would put that information out there, not to scare the public, but to really just bring attention to it in the hopes that if you do see anything that, anything suspicious, anything that stands out, and that's always been my push, especially out in the rural areas and stuff there. Maybe it's a little more difficult within the bigger cities like this one here. But, even, when you live in a cul-de-sac and, people tend to know what vehicles should be down around that area, and that, like, if even one of my members drove through there, that wouldn't even mean anything to them, whether that black Ram truck was in that area. But to somebody who lives there, they're like, that truck has never been around here before. So why are they down here? So, bring those things to our attention, call that in. Somebody's suspicious. There were some people that were kind of, some of those break and enters were happening in the backyard. So there was a certain MO that was consistent with a number of those break-ins. So that would be, we feel it's a very strong possibility that the same person or persons are responsible for those break-ins. I have worked with my staff sergeant as well as our plainclothes unit in order to have one of our specialty units there take a look at all of those type of files in order to, and our our analysts there as well, to see if there is any similarities between those. And once again, even in the general area, we worked with Edmonton Police and those ones. It looks like the numbers did go up over a couple of weekends. We put extra resources towards that. We redeployed some of our members for additional visibility in those areas. We've been pulling that video. So we still have a team that's looking into that in order to, hopefully make an arrest on that. But I can tell you that since that second weekend where we had additional break and enters, that hasn't happened since. So maybe I'll just take credit for it stopping, I guess. But
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great. I
that
mean,
would-
when our numbers are low, that a few weekends of
Yeah.
backyard break and enter creates a blip in the curve.
Yeah.
We're actually blessed to have low numbers that shows up as an issue. So thank you for being on top of that.
No problem.
Okay, I see no more hands up. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a good conversation, one of the better engagements in a policing or RCMP update. So thanks for everyone for the questions and you, Dwayne, for showing up. This was just there was no motion associated with this. It was just for information. So I'm gonna move on to the next item on our agenda, which was committee business. 9.1 was approved on consent, which was our public appointments to our civic agencies and quasi judicial boards, all our advisory committees like EAC and CAC. So the motion read that the members of the public be appointed to the City of St. Albert civic agencies and that the City of St. Albert quasi judicial boards for terms effective January 1st of 25, as specified in the document entitled Confidential Civic Agency Appointments 2025. Now that the motion has passed, it is now public. I'm not going to read every name on this list because it's quite a long one. But every one of them will receive a letter letting them know of their appointment. And I just want to thank all of them for stepping up, of course. And I need to thank my council for spending an entire Saturday in November interviewing. I think we had over 70 applications. So it was a great day with great St. Albertans interested in helping out our local government. So appreciate all of that. The next two motions were both requests for decision. They're both related to grants. So 10.1, the motion read, whereas the city of St. Albert intends to make an application to the government of Alberta's local growth and sustainability grant program to support the infrastructure servicing of Lakeview Business District, be it resolved that the council of the city of St. Albert duly assembled hereby supports this application. So we are looking for some money out of that newly announced grant, which is $20 million a year to help us with Lakeview's infrastructure. And the second grant, the motion read, this is 10.2 on our agenda, that council support in partnership with the Natural Asset Initiative, the City of St. Albert's application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund Climate Ready Plans and Processes Grant Program. And considering I'm in Ottawa right now for FCM, I might have to put in a plug for that grant application. So we are now, what time is it? We're doing okay. 20 minutes before the public hearing. 11.1, I think we could probably get this done, which is bylaw 22. The natural gas franchise distribution was pulled by Councillor Hughes for voting purposes. So why don't I ask somebody to put the motion on the floor and we can get on with the vote. Thanks, you, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that bylaw 22/2024 be read a second time.
Awesome. Any opening comments on that, Wes?
Well, Madam Mayor, we've discussed the franchise fee at length in previous meetings, and the idea of re-engaging with Fortis over for the next 10-year term is part of this motion. And a change to the rate was also part of the motion. So, and this has been discussed previously. This is just the final two readings.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Hughes?
Yes, just briefly, just council, we actually don't have to do this still. I realize we put the petition forward to have it before, but there's a lot of other ways that we can reduce the taxes by 0.5%. I think it was demonstrated in this council. There's policy changes that we can make regarding many other things that without affecting anything with service levels that would not involve a franchise fee. So I understand that this is a quick and easy way to make the taxes look like they went down by 0.5%, but there's so many other ways that we could do this without actually forcing people to pay more on their gas bill. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Killick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Broadhead said, we have discussed it quite a bit when I brought it forward. And it's important to note that this $4 million that is raised through the franchise fee going up to the 25% is already included in our baseline budget for 2025. So it's important that we recognize that is already baked into our budget. In the background, it was really interesting to note, and I know we discussed this a little bit when the fee was first brought forward, but in our benchmarking mid-sized cities, it was interesting to note that the city of Airdrie has had their municipal franchise fee for gas at 29% since 2007. So they have raised a significant amount of money over a long period of time that has gone to offset taxes. And for us to be sort of in a catch-up mode, getting ours to 25%, not even 29.6, which Airdrie's is, as we're often benchmarked against. Why are our taxes so high in St. Albert? Well, it's because other areas have franchise fees that are much, much higher than ours. So this is a great opportunity, second and third reading, to bring ours just a little bit closer to some of the other local cities that we're often compared to, and to offset taxes in a responsible way. We're still way behind many other cities like Sherwood Park, You know, Spruce Grove is at 35%, Stony Plains at 35%, Edmonton is at 35%. So this is a great opportunity. We have very limited tools in our toolbox to manage our budgets, and one is raise taxes, the other one is look at changes to franchise fees, and this is a good step in that direction.
Thank you. Councillor Brometsky.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'll counter Councillor Killick's argument. And one thing that we didn't discuss when this was going through council before was the 100 cities that were listed as provided in this backgrounder. And we are higher than 64 cities in that 100 cities. So we can do the comparables of the cities that are higher than us, but there's many, many, many that are lower than us. So that's my counter argument to that. And the other argument is that a lot of the smaller regions don't have the ability to collect tax from a higher population, and they're managing in smaller municipalities without taking extra franchise fee money to cap up tax dollars. So that was just not mentioned in the first meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. This was on consent, so I'm not going to add much except for the fact that I hope that we left nothing on the table during budget that we could lower our taxes any further, and I don't think we did. So this, if we were to remove this today, our taxes would definitely go up. So I'll let you close, Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. For those who have questions around franchise fees, I would implore everyone to do some study about it. Basically, those who pay franchise fees is a larger group than pay municipal property taxes. And so that's where your benefit comes from. People who use these utilities pay for them, but many of them don't pay property taxes. So in any case, not to re-debate the whole issue again, I'll just close it down.
Thank you. I'm going to call for the vote. Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, I did on the other thing without thinking about it. I'm against.
So that motion carries with Councillor Romansky and Hughes opposed. Councillor Broadhead, third time.
That bylaw 22/2024 be read a third time.
Awesome. I'm going to call for the vote. Just leaving my check mark up.
Mayor, mine's showing up as, I'm a no. Just, here we go. There we go.
Okay. The motion carries. Okay. Next on our agenda is the community standards bylaw. We have 13 minutes before the public hearing. I believe Aaron has a presentation. Is that correct? Mr. Fletcher?
He is here, he opening comments. I don't think it's a formal
Oh,
presentation.
I thought there was we got some slides in our agenda package. Well, why don't we go with opening comments? I don't think we're going to get through this before the public hearing. but let's
Actually,
get
if you give him a
started.
minute, he's indicating he does have a short couple of PowerPoint presentations.
Okay,
together.
thanks. Let's get him up. Can you share your screen, Aaron?
We just need 1 minute.
Okay.
He got booted out of Zoom, so he's just getting back in.
Aha, I see it. We can also see your speaking notes, Aaron.
We're just getting IT support for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm all set. It's been a long time since I've been here, so thank you for your patience.
Oh, I'm sad to miss you, Aaron.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council, here today to present some brief history and some further context surrounding administration's recommendations on the community standards bylaw. So on October 3rd, 2003, council directed administration to review bylaws and recommend amendments that would provide a wider scope of landscape options, including food crops, pollinating gardens, rain gardens, and xeriscaping. On May 14th, 2023, administration presented to the Standing Committee of the Whole with these proposed amendments to the community standards bylaw. At the May 14th meeting of SCOW directed administration to review options to further amend the community standards bylaw based on the discussion of the committee. So there were two main areas that the committee had discussed, and one of them was to revise or not the definition of weeds so that they would only require noxious and prohibited noxious weeds to be maintained at the 15 centimeter height standard, and to revise or not the bylaw to prohibit clover lawns from encroaching onto city or other private property. So after careful consideration of the SCOW discussion related to the definition of weed, administration is not recommending any changes to the proposed bylaw. This is mainly because nuisance weeds such as, but not limited to, dandelion, foxtail barley, and stinkweed would not require any maintenance and could have a negative impact on the environment by competing with native plants and agricultural crops. In addition, unmaintained nuisance weeds such as dandelion is believed to be one of the leading factors that causes residents to complain about unkempt properties. So between the start of May and the end of October in 2024, municipal enforcement received over 140 complaints dealing with weeds and tall grass. This was an increase from the previous year where municipal enforcement received 82 complaints. One other thing to keep in mind is that the current bylaw requires grass to be cut at the 15 centimeters height standard. If the definition of weed is restricted to just noxious and prohibited noxious weeds, then a resident would be able to grow a dandelion lawn without any requirement to maintain it or to cut it. Whereas a resident who grows a more common fescue or bluegrass lawn would be required to maintain it at the 15 centimeter height standard. So to help illustrate some of the conditions that our municipal enforcement officer section has received complaints, or here's a few complaints that they've received over the years of properties that have had dandelions grow in excess of the 15 centimeters. If changes were to occur to the bylaw that would exclude a dandelion, enforcement officers would be unable to compel property owners in these situations to cut that vegetation down. This slide illustrates another weed that does not fall under the definition of noxious or prohibited noxious, which is foxtail barley. This particular weed has been identified as a hazard to pets and wildlife due to the barbed seeds that can become lodged in their eyes, ears, noses, and paws, which can be very painful and dangerous for them. In terms of the prohibiting clover encroachment, again, administration reviewed this and is not recommending changes to the proposed bylaw. And this is mainly because the enforcement, this is a provision that's just not enforceable. And is due to the nature of how clover seeds spread. They spread through the air, and officers would simply not be able to make a legal argument or to determine where that clover came from. if an unenforceable provision in the bylaw was added, it just may lead to unrealistic expectations and dissatisfaction from residents when officers don't take action. So this brings our recommendation back to what was originally proposed to SCAO. That is that the community standards bylaw is amended by maintaining the 15 centimeter height standard for grass and weeds. It adds a definition of grass that would exempt ornamental grasses. It adds a weed definition that would allow for clover lawns, provided that they are maintained at the same 15 centimeter height standard as grass lawns, or that the clover is maintained within a defined flower, shrub bed, or container, such as a pot. Further amendments would include the removal of the definition of naturalization area, a new educational statement that would help advise residents that they can consider alternative landscape options such as food crops and rain gardens, and then also an exemption for city property. As previously presented to the Standing Committee of the Whole, if these recommendations were passed, administration would still have intentions to explore opportunities and make revisions to the city website that would help inform residents on how they can legally implement and incorporate administrative landscape options on their property. And that concludes my brief presentation, and happy to answer any questions if there are any prior to the public hearing.
Sorry, Mayor Heron, you're muted.
So I turned off my mic because I was making coffee. Sorry. Natalie, I'm going to go to you. We have 5 minutes, actually 4. And I know you're going to have lots to talk about on this one. So let's ask your first question maybe, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So my first question is about that photo that you had up of kind of some of the problem properties. So just to confirm, if we got rid of that, like added weeds, we wouldn't be able to tell people to cut those down to 15 centimeters if that 15 centimeter limit was in place?
That's correct.
Why not? Like, why not? Because we're doing that right now.
So the way that the bylaw is written, it basically says a nuisance property includes A, B, C, D, F, G. And one of those provisions in there says that a weed or grass that is over 15 centimeters is considered to be a nuisance property. So if we define weed as something that is only prohibited, noxious, then basically it says that a dandelion does not have to be cut, anything that's not within that provision.
So we'd have to just make the bylaw really clear that it's kind of like lawn areas have to be kept down to the 15 centimeters, kind of like it is right now.
Well, what the proposal intends to do is to not make a big shift in terms of grass or weeds being cut and maintained at 15 centimeters. It just adds clarity that clover lawn has to be maintained at 15 centimeters and can be permitted, but other weeds would continue to be still within that definition of weed, right? So foxtail, barley, dandelion.
Okay, I guess so Mayor, kind of as the time is wrapping up, my comment would be that when I propose the removal of adding dandelions as a weed, I would want some kind of motion that would say that the expectation would still be that, you can have a yard with kind of full of plants that are waist height. So I don't know how to best do that.
So you're saying you would be okay with dandelions on a lawn as long as they're kept under 15 centimeters?
Well, or if just, I just don't want to have dandelions mentioned as a weed because it creates this idea that they're
right,
not a food. Yeah.
It builds the perception. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's my concern.
Okay. All right. We'll probably have a chance to maybe work on that motion. Maybe you could talk to Marta, and Aaron's right in the room, so that helps. Why don't we, Mike, I'll let you go, but I'm going to limit you to 1 minute.
Oh, sure.
Or do you want to wait? You can wait.
No, just 2 simple questions. Aaron, in the definitions of what we said was a weed, we talked about dandelion, stinkweed, chickweed, and foxtail, but in one of the other slides it only mentioned 3 of them, dandelion, stinkweed, foxtail, it didn't have chickweed, so there, and in the red line version of the document, it was different, I think, on page 142. Any reason for that?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Gillick. So the definition of weed is, those were just examples. If you look at the definition of weed, it says as determined by a peace officer. And the intent was to show a couple of examples of what a weed is, but not an inclusive or I guess a complete picture of every single weed in Alberta, because that would be a very exhaustive list. So it's still a subjective determination from an officer standpoint as to what a weed is and is not. What that definition really does is very clearly says clover is not a weed if certain conditions apply. But the rest of the weeds and vegetation would still be considered a weed.
Okay, I'm totally okay with clover, so I'm not worried about that one. This, and
That's it, Mike, it's 2:00, so we're gonna have to open up the public hearing.
okay,
So I'm coming to you first as soon as it's over. I don't think this public hearing is gonna take very long. So Aaron, please don't go too far. It's 2:00. That's the advertised time. So I'm gonna open the public hearing for bylaw 25, 2024, which is a land use bylaw amendment to Schedule A, and that is for Shiro. It's redistricting. We're trying to get through for second and third reading today, so I'm opening the public hearing. As per usual, you guys know the drill. If you have any conflict of interest, I will hear it now. Seeing none, this has been proposed by the landowner, so we'll hear from administration first, and then I do have two scheduled speakers. Are they in chambers?
yes,
Okay, perfect. But they have indicated, they're from Select Engineering, sorry, and Rohit, that they are here to answer questions of council only. They're not making a presentation. So let's start with administration. So we will go to Eric, I think is doing it. So go ahead. Are we good to go? It's very quiet all of a sudden.
Just a very minor technical issue. I think we're.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, good afternoon. My name's Eric Schultz. I'm from Planning and Development here to present bylaw 25/2024, which is a redistricting in the Shiro neighborhood. Shiro is a residential neighborhood on the west side of St. Albert. It's located west of Ray Gibbon Drive and north of Township Road 540A. This bylaw is an amendment to the land use bylaw Schedule A. Schedule A graphically represents all parcels of land in St. Albert and their current land use district. When there's a change to Schedule A, redistricting occurs. This slide shows the current district of the land being proposed to be redistricted. The three blue hatched areas are where their proposal is, and the redistricting will be 1.4 hectares approximately. This is the proposed redistricting. There are three components to it. The first is the yellow hatched area. They're going to be changing an area of small lot residential to laned lot residential. This will enable them to put in a laneway, and that will allow laned housing products to be used. In order to maintain the residential lot depth to the west, we have to convert a strip of the park into small lot residential, which is represented by the beige narrow strip there. And in order to maintain the park width, we have to redistrict a small part of the HDR high density residential to the west there to park. That's represented by the green skinny hatched dotted area. The proposed redistricting is shown on the neighborhood plan in hatched blue lines. And again, this one aligns with the Shiro, this redistricting aligns with the Sherrill Neighborhood Plan. The application was circulated to internal and external stakeholders, as well as landowners within 100 meters of the proposed redistricting. There were no concerns or comments raised. In conclusion, this application aligns with the Municipal Development Plan Flourish, the St. Albert West Area Structure Plan, and the Sherrill Neighborhood Plan. Therefore, administration recommends that bylaw 25/2024 as presented here today be approved. Administration is available for questions, and I believe the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Eric, I have a quick one. Because it feels like we're losing, how does this affect overall density? Because you've got small lot going to lane lot, and so we need to have some land use for lanes, and then so you move some of the park into small lot, and then the sacrifice was the high density. So overall, we must be losing some units somewhere along the lines. Are we good?
As from what we saw in the application, everything is still good, and the adding the lane lots is just making them same number of lots with a lane in the middle, and losing that little bit of high density. I believe the applicant can answer to that, speak to that one, but
Okay.
I don't think it's affecting it any amount.
All right, I might ask them. All right, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So just what I'm hearing here is just we're gonna take it from small lots. We're just gonna add a lane. We gotta shift everything over. So then we just had to like juggle everything down the line again so that we could still have a park and still have other houses, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So this is pretty simple. Okay.
Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Eric, could you bring up slide 4 again for me? Just a little bit where it's the yellow hatched area, and we're making those lots deeper, it says. There's a lane. Where's the front of the house? And it's not on a road, it's now on a lane. Is that correct?
No, so what's happening is there's a road, basically a loop road around the whole yellow. So they're putting a lane down the very middle of it and just pushing them out a little bit.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question. I just couldn't see it in the patched over pieces there. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hughes.
No, that was from before. I just didn't lower my hand.
Okay.
There.
All right, any more questions for our admin team? All right, does anyone have any questions? According to my email, we've got Kyla Otway and Doug Vanderbrink from Select Engineering and Rohit Group somewhere in the gallery. Do we have any questions for them? Could maybe one of you just answer my question about the sacrifice of a little bit of the high density and how, if you're still going to put the same number of units into that HDR zoning district? And thanks for joining us.
Hello, I'm Kyla Away from Select Engineering. The impact on density is pretty minor, so it would be 0.13 hectare smaller for the HDR site. The zoning for that has a range of 100 to 140 dwelling units per net residential hectares. So, sorry. There's a potential of 13 to 18 units less, but depending on the number of units chosen within the density range, the density could be, the amount of units could be the exact same as well.
Yeah.
It's a very minor change.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like at this point, there's no plans to develop in that HDR area, so it's still very much open and up to what happens in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, perfect. That's all I needed.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Not a question. I'll make the motion when you're ready.
Wow, okay. Anyone else have any questions for either the proponent or administration? And there's no public input, so I will take your motion, Councillor McKay, to close the public hearing.
That the public hearing on bylaw 25/2024 be closed.
Perfect. Okay, I'll take a vote on that. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Councillor Mackay, do you feel like keep going with first, second, and third?
Yep, you bet.
Okay.
I'll wait till it's up. Actually, I got it here in front of me. That bylaw 25/2024 being amendment 1 to the land use bylaw 18/2024 be read a first time.
Okay, any comments on that?
No, maybe on wrap up, I'll say something.
Seeing no more hands go up, I'll call for the vote. That is unanimous. Second reading?
That bylaw 25/2024 be read a second time.
Call for the vote. That appears to be unanimous, and I need a unanimous consent vote. Ken, you can do that one as well if you want.
I can do it, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Hughes, thanks.
That the unanimous consent be given for consideration of third reading of bylaw 25/2024.
Awesome, thank you so much. Call for the vote. That's unanimous, so we can keep going. And Councillor Mackay, third reading.
Yeah, that bylaw 25/2024 be read a third time. And really the only comments that I have is that obviously this is just something that our developer has looked at as a change in the land use bylaw and permissible. So they're actually just making the decision to move forward with that small change.
Yeah, next steps along that development. I think you're right, Councillor Mackay. The picture that Eric had on the screen shows how much Rowhead has been built out in a short amount of time. So glad to see the next step coming.
Getting closer to the community amenities site.
That's right. Okay, call for the vote. And that's unanimous. Okay, well done, guys. Fast and easy and painless public hearing. Okay, we're back to the community standards bylaw. Councillor Killick, I'm gonna go right back to you because I left you hanging before, so go ahead.
That's okay, Madam Mayor, no problem. Aaron is gonna just rejoin us here. It was a
Okay.
question for him. He can hear me as he walks up, I'm sure. And it was a question around the definition of boulevard in the bylaw. We seem to have clarified that the boulevards that the city owns along, I think it was defined as major roadway, they will be able to have grasses and other plants taller than the 15 centimeters. But in front of a person's property, the picture that with the foxtail that you showed, that is still classified as a boulevard, I think. But because it's on a neighborhood road, I'm not quite sure what the definitions are. I just want to make sure that the boulevards in front of people's houses still have to be maintained to the 15 centimeters. And is that captured in there?
The short answer is yes, it is captured in there. So when we look at the city exemption, it's not meant for that city property. It's meant for parks and maintenance in those areas so that council could set the service standard in there. Now, for the boulevards, there's another provision that we have in there that requires the property owners to maintain not only their property, but the property in front of them all the way to the edge of the roadway. So yes, a boulevard is included. For those purposes, it would be the homeowner's responsibility to maintain that at 15 centimeters.
Okay, thank you. That's good clarification. That's what I wanted to make sure that piece of grass in front of people's houses was still their responsibility to maintain.
Okay. Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, thank you. Aaron, I'm wondering if you can bring up that photo of the properties with the really tall plants in the side yard.
Absolutely, Counselor. He's just working on it.
Sorry, I will try.
Thanks so much. So I guess my question just about that photo, it went by really quickly, is if there's grass in and amongst those plants, my assumption is that the 15 centimeter rule would apply. Like unless someone takes scissors and cuts every blade of grass down to 10 centimeters. That's a good face, Wes. I enjoyed that.
I'm gonna wait for the picture to pop up.
This is killer.
We're just sourcing tech support again here.
So I guess, Aaron, my question would be, even if that noxious weed, kind of, it was, so to me, it looks like there's grass in there. So that would have to be cut down to the 15 centimeters. Is that right? Unless they took scissors and went around all the dandelions.
Sorry, we're having, yeah, challenges showing this on the screen.
We can see
We
it.
can see it. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see it now. It's good.
So the question is the grass within the weeds would still have to be maintained to the 15 centimeters?
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. So
Okay.
when there is
So
a
unless you put scissors to it, like really you'd be mowing that all to down.
no, and I guess that would be the risk if there was a mixture, if there's the intent of that section in the bylaw is to really say weeds and grass, maintain it at that 15 centimeters, unless it's part of a, shrub and a shrub bed and all those different
Mhm.
things, right? What we don't want to see is someone maintaining grass again with scissors, but then leaving foxtail barley or thistle, other things that are higher. So
So we think that's likely that like I would go to my side yard with scissors and cut around the
I do not think that's likely at all.
Okay.
However, I've been doing this job for 23 years and I've seen property owners do find loopholes in legislation to get around specifically doing things just out of spite. So it's those things that occurs, I wouldn't say frequently, but it's not uncommon either.
You saw my front yard, didn't you, a couple of years ago? Okay, so I've got a few questions, Mayor, if you're okay, if I kind of get into
Keep
them.
going, yeah. And then I'll go to Mr. Keller.
So I have a few questions about the exemption for city land. So right now, our standard answer when someone complains about dandelions in parks is that dandelions are not considered a noxious weed under the Alberta Weed Control Act. And that means that widespread chemical dandelion and other aesthetic weed control on turf areas is not part of our program. So just to confirm, that would absolutely stay the same if this bylaw passes as it is, right? So not changing anything having to do with parks.
Correct. There's no changes to programming as part of this legislation change.
Okay, and school board lands would be exempt as well?
Actually, no. School board land property is not specifically exempt.
Okay, so have we got feedback from the school board about the increased cost to be able to kind of change their standards?
So nothing's changed in terms of school boards. So I can share with you that I do not recall any complaints about school boards, and I believe the city maintains most of them. But again, it wasn't something that was actually contemplated.
Okay, so I guess that brings me to my next question. So if the city is responsible for maintaining the school board land, is the intent that we would increase service levels for those areas?
I don't believe so. It was one of those, again, I can't speak to the programming of public operations. I can only speak to the intent of the changes in the amendment to the community standards bylaw, and that specifically wasn't something contemplated again. So it may be something that we might have to go back and on.
Just to be clear, Councillor, there was zero discussion about altering or recommending to council, I guess it's more properly put, to alter service levels to reflect this.
Okay, thank you. So I guess one of the kind of assumptions with this is that we would change our service levels. So, you know, if I live across the street from a city park that's covered in dandelions, can I, like, there's no expectation that that would be cut any quicker than it is now, eh? Okay.
No.
My next question is, so regarding the definitions for grass to include specific species, so bluegrass, ryegrass, Bermuda grass, and fescue grass, are those all native grasses?
I'm probably gonna have to pass that on to environment to answer that, but what I can tell you is any reference to grass or a specific species, either in the definition of grass or the definition of weed, is not intended to be an exclusive list. It's just
Sure.
to show some examples.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if those examples are native species.
But I'll leave that and pass that on to environment if they're online.
Yeah, and I think Ms. Logan is online and can respond to that question.
Hi there. Some of those are native and some are not. Some are used for ornamental purposes.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll have another question about the grass that are not native in a second. So Aaron, you talked a little bit about the definitions of the weeds as not kind of meant to be exhaustive. So it's open to interpretation. So would I be able to complain that, like, my neighbor's bluegrass, which is non-native, is encroaching onto my land? Like, could I complain that they've got bluegrass in their front yard because it's non-native?
Certainly if it was over 15 centimeters, yes.
Okay. Okay, but that doesn't have to do, like, it's as long as it's okay that it's non-native, right? As long as it's under the 15 centimeters.
Correct. And it would be the same for dandelion. So as a dandelion would be fine to have on your lawn as long as it's under 15 centimeters.
Okay. So the rationale behind adding weed definitions kind of that exceed that provincial legislation, it says that non-native species can have a negative environmental impact by competing with native plants and agricultural crops, particularly in disturbed areas. So does that kind of explanation also apply to those non-native grasses?
I'm going to have to pass that on to our experts in environment again.
Yeah, Ms. Logan.
Absolutely, it does.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to skip a couple of those. Okay, so this is talking about, so section 5.3 says nothing in kind of the definitions is meant to limit a person from planting food crops. So dandelions were brought over to North America as a food and medicine. I personally use them as a food. So could I grow dandelion intentionally and be allowed to grow that over the 15 centimeters because of that exclusion?
In the current version of the bylaw, I would say no, because we are interpreting dandelion as more commonly a weed than a food. So right now we would maintain that at the 15 centimeters.
So I could bring you 10 books that say that it's a food. And that exclusion says I can grow food. So that doesn't count.
So I think I can give you the answer from an enforcement perspective, and it's going to be hard to speculate as what a court would find. But I would say from an enforcement perspective, we would enforce the 15 centimeter rule on all dandelions, unless further amendments were made to this bylaw that would specifically exclude it, similar to clover. What a court would do, I don't know. I think that would be an interesting case in front of a justice.
Marta, do you have any thoughts about what a court might do about that? It's a weird one.
Yeah, so I think Aaron's right in the sense that we do offer a dandelion currently as an example of a weed in the definition of weed. So I think what we could do is just take out the example of dandelion in the definition of weed. And then I think you could then rely on the exemption in 5(3). But I think it would still be under the 15 centimeter limit, but it would be allowed under 15 centimeters. So what I would recommend is taking out the word dandelions out of the definition of weed in the email I sent you. That's kind of, that's what we are suggesting.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have for questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, and just so I know, Councillor Jolly, you are going to be making some amendments at second reading?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to just get us to stick to the provincial definition of weed first. So that's, I think, or alternative motion 2 or something like
That
that.
was in the background and
Yeah,
Marta.
in the background here.
Okay,
So I'll try for that. If that fails, then I'll try to just get dandelion removed.
okay. Councillor Killick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Aaron, I wonder, you said the list was not exhaustive, which I totally understand. When I pulled up the information from the Alberta Agricultural website, they have what they call a pest selector tool, and it has weed selectors on it, and it has prohibited noxious weeds, a big long list. It has noxious weeds, and then it has common weeds, and it's a fairly extensive 2-page list. I apologize, you probably can't see it on screen, but under the common list, it starts with chickweed is listed as a common weed. Dandelion is listed as a common weed. Foxtail is listed as a common weed, and stinkweed is listed as a common weed. So the provincial government, is that what you would have looked at to select the dandelion, foxtail, etc., and said, I don't want to list all 40 of them that are on this page, but that was your starting point as a reference?
I didn't look at that specific site that you're referring to. What I can tell you though is prior to the current version of the Weed Act in Alberta, there was a different version where they listed noxious restricted. The new restricted is prohibited noxious, but they used to list nuisance weeds, and under nuisance weeds, it'll probably be the exact same list as what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And that was, my time from years ago, and those dandelion, chickweed, stinkweed, foxtail, barley were part of the nuisance list.
Yeah. So at any rate, I pulled that off today, off the government website today as a list of common weeds under their weed selector tool. And I was surprised that all of those are listed. Also, there's this little booklet that's called Invasive Plants of Alberta, and it has again, it's published by the Alberta government. It's supported by the Alberta Invasive Species Council, and it's on the back pages of it. It says thumbnail of other common weeds, and it shows dandelion as one. Did you happen to reference that in picking out that dandelions are commonly referred to as a weed?
Not specifically, I did not.
Okay, but it would be a good, you would think that this booklet published by the provincial government would be a good guide as to what a weed is. Would that be fair?
I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
Yeah. The other one that I found really interesting when we went to look at this, it came from the Alberta Native Plant Council. And again, the very first thing you do when you type in Alberta Native Plant Council, the very first thing that comes up on their search list is common dandelion is an introduced weed. Introduced. And when you pull up the information and read it, it says it's not native. It's an introduced weed from it's been introduced to North America. And since it was introduced, it has been spread across the continent as a weed. And it defines weed as a weed is a plant that grows where it is not wanted. So it's not a noxious weed or a prohibited weed, but it's something that is out of place, like a big thistle plant growing in the middle of your lawn, or huge group of dandelions or foxtail growing in the middle of your lawn. So it's a fairly commonly accepted term as to what a weed is, and it's well documented in all kinds of publications. Is that the kind of information that guided the principles of what we're trying to accomplish here?
I think, again, Councillor Kulik, I didn't use that specific reference, but what I can tell you is that with more of the open definition that we're proposing in our bylaw, where we've listed a couple, but not all, it is subjective, and what an officer would do when faced with a particular species, if they didn't know what that species was, they would be looking to common places that you've referenced to help determine what a reasonable person would conclude is a weed or is not a weed. And that's usually the test that's also used within court if there's no very specific definition in other pieces of legislation. So I think what you've referred to are areas that an officer would potentially use if needed, if there was some dispute as to a particular species.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate determination would end up on a particular case or a court, who would then say agree or disagree, and then that would then inform case law. So it's a longer answer of saying that it's good reference material, but the ultimate determination ends up with a court, depending on the specific words in our bylaw.
Yeah, I would hate to think that a dandelion would ever go to court, but question for our legal counsel. There was some concerns that we were going to be out of step by defining weeds that were not defined as noxious or prohibited noxious in the Alberta Weed Act. But as clarification, we as a municipality can go beyond what the provincial guidelines are. And the example I would use would be our bicycle helmet bylaw, where provincial government regulation said one thing, age 16, I think it was, but we went quite a bit bigger step to define something specific for St. Albert that was different than the provincial government. So we have the latitude to define that within our own bylaw here without running afoul of provincial government terminologies.
Yep, so we are allowed to be more restrictive as long as we're in compliance with the overarching provincial legislation. So that's a great example with the bike helmets. The smoking bylaw is another example. This would be another example. It's acceptable from a legal perspective, and there is the authority for a bylaw to do that.
Okay, thank you. So we basically have the latitude to do what is proposed in the bylaw with defining what common weeds would be.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just getting confused. Like, I don't even know which way is up anymore when it comes to these weeds. So what's being recommended right now is that right now dandelions are included as a weed, and anything that's a weed can be grown but not higher than 15 centimeters. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct.
Including the really bad weeds that are like, bad weeds.
So,
No.
the noxious and prohibited noxious are governed by provincial legislation. So if you're in the noxious list, you have to maintain it and control it, and that can be controlled by cutting or by spraying. In the prohibited noxious list, you have to eliminate it. You have to pull it right from the roots and get rid of it completely. The weeds that we're contemplating within the community standards bylaw are more those nuisance ones that aren't regulated in the Weed Act. And those ones can be grown as long as they are under 15 centimeters.
Okay, because this is where I guess the lack of specificity is what's kind of throwing me off right now. Because I look at the definition of weed and it says noxious or prohibited. So is there somewhere in here that I'm missing that says that we have to pull these little guys out? Because right now they're actually covered under the under 15 centimeter category by definition of weed. So am I missing something here? And I might be.
So you're not wrong. Those are still included in that. And really that's a mechanism that still allows us more so for the noxious weed is where we would use that to say you need to maintain these, and we may give an order under the community standards bylaw. And this is rather than giving an order under community standards bylaw and an order under the municipal or under the Weed Control Act. It's an effective or efficient way of giving a notice to a property owner, so we don't have to give two different notices. But the provincial legislation will always trump that. So what's in the Weed Act will still trump anything that may be interpreted in this act as offside with the Weed Act. So if, for example, let's say there was a prohibited noxious weed and somebody said, well, under their bylaw, it says I only have to keep it under 15 centimeters. We would say, no, in fact, there's the Weed Act that requires you to remove it completely. And here's your notice under the Weed Act to do that. That makes sense.
Okay. I know that we don't normally mention it in other things if it's not like from the province, but in this case, it might actually be helpful. I realize that I'm not going to do any things, but if this comes back in the future, just to say noxious weeds have to be treated as that. And then, because this, I feel like it has a loophole right now.
I think we're actually, we're on the stronger side of it than not. And I think what we have as an opportunity is one of our other plans, if this is passed, is to create a website and a web page that really speaks to this stuff a little bit better, and where we can speak to which, you know, how someone could potentially grow dandelion as a food crop if they maintain it under 15 centimeters, how somebody can put a food crop in their front yard as long as they get potential development permits if it's not over a certain height standard, and all those different aspects. And we could include probably some clarity, as you suggest, around the restricted weed side.
Okay, so Councillor Jolly's planning to put forward that motion that just noxious weeds. So I'm just trying to figure out what's, just to preempt this, and I'll come to questions later. So what does that mean? Does that mean that chickweed and stinkweed and all those would then be okie dokie? Or what would that mean? Because I know you were recommending not to do it, but if it does pass, what did we just pass?
That would be our interpretation, that if that passes and a weed is defined as only a weed that is noxious or prohibited noxious under the Weed Act, then a dandelion, foxtail barley, chickweed, stinkweed can grow as high as they want because they're not regulated under the provincial law.
Okay, and if with Marta, if you were to do the recognition he's had, just remove dandelion from that sentence, then it would be a bit more subjective, depending on whether or not they could justify it as a food crop. And if they couldn't, it would sort of still fall under the 15 centimeter category. Is that what I'm interpreting?
Sorry, I'm just trying to turn my camera on at the same time. Yes, you're correct.
Okay, I think I know what we're voting on right now. That's it for now. Thank you.
I'm on the City of Red Deer site just for fun. Did you know baby's breath is a prohibited noxious weed? I did not know that. Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Really quick, and I'll just wait for administration. They're just huddling. They're trying to figure out what to get you for Christmas, I'm sure. Just a real quick question. Where did the 15 centimeters come from?
So when 15 centimeters was introduced to this bylaw, it was done when the original version happened, I think in 2010. And that came from a benchmarking of other municipalities. Some had 15, I think some went down to 10 and some went up to 20. We picked 15. To recommend to council at the time. And then at the end of the day, it's something that if council wanted to amend that to 20, it's really it's a standard that is in the hands of council to set for the community as what they believe is an appropriate height for the aesthetics of the community.
No, I'm just curious as to whether that was in some regulation or in some kind of a case law that said 15 centimeters was a nuisance, but 14 centimeters isn't.
No, it helps enforcement officers just set that threshold. So when we give a notice, the whole community standards bylaw. So prior to this version in 2010, we had an unsightly property bylaw. And that was, I believe, one page, maybe 3 or 4 sections that basically said, if you have an unsightly, you're not allowed to have an unsightly property. And it was left completely subjective to any individual officer to determine what that unsightliness was. So what we tried to do with this version is just add in some more objective measures to be a little bit clearer on that. And that's what that 15 centimeters allows us to happen, just like a speed limit. You still have some discretion, of course. I don't think anyone's ever gotten a ticket for doing 51 in a 50 zone. And I think if someone had 16 centimeters or 17 centimeters of grass height, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're immediately going to give an order. It's an officer's view of the totality of that property at the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think as somebody who has been forced to make those kind of decisions, you rely on kind of standards and or previous case law. But I mean, certainly if you went there and all you saw was a field of dandelions, and if some were 14, some were 16, you would have to make your call in totality. But if it was also with abandoned vehicles, or if it had all sorts of other rubbish in that yard, you would make that call in totality based on what you have as discretion, and then make the call to say that that's a nuisance and we're going to deal with it under the bylaw, versus maybe just some field that's got somebody's backyard that's got a mix of weeds, but they're not, so it's really officer's discretion still.
Absolutely.
Okay, I see no more hands up. I do feel for you, Aaron. I hate leaving it up to the discretion of your officers, because it just can open it up for debate, which is difficult, but I know you're doing your best. Why don't we get first reading on the floor? And then we can talk about what Natalie's proposed amendments are. Anyone want to make that? Go ahead, Councillor Killick. Thank you.
That bylaw 30/2024 being amendment number 3 to bylaw 12/2010 be read a first time.
Okay, I'll accept that. We'll vote on first reading and take your amendments at second reading, Councillor Jolly, okay? So Councillor Killick, any opening comments on that?
Well, I think we've, through our questions, tried to clarify what the definition of the prohibited noxious, which is the worst ones that got to get ripped out of the ground. We have noxious weeds that have to be controlled. And then we can have for St. Albert a list of nuisance weeds that has been tried to be clarified in the bylaw to a general term, not an exhaustive list, although an exhaustive list does exist, or a more comprehensive list does exist on the Alberta government website. This proposed bylaw would make it clear for our bylaw enforcement. It actually lists out a couple of examples of what would be determined as weeds, where they could be controlled, and gives the tools to our bylaw enforcement, which I think they are desperately asking for, to have a clear tool to help address and resolve complaints that are made by residents. And it would give them that tool of definitions of what weeds are even under nuisance weeds, and also a height restriction that would be clear, obviously with some discretion, but this bylaw lays those out. It also clarifies that we're not going to apply this to our service level standards, and no changes to those for parks and boulevards that the city maintains. So it doesn't put any other onerous conditions on us. And I think this is a good bylaw to bring forward.
Okay, Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you through the mayor. I do agree with this bylaw for the best part, except the clovers lawns. A few comments on that. That clovers are not native to Alberta either. There's prairie clover, which is, but there's yellow, white, red that were introduced mainly from Europe and a lot of times grown for forage plants. So I'm not really sure once people start getting into clover lawns, you know, even if they're trimmed, what root systems, what, you know, controls will be put into other people's yards from them. So I would certainly prefer the box method instead, but we'll see in the future if this goes through. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I noticed this past summer that, you know, a lot of people, once this was, you know, brought up in council and mentioned and so on, that just let clover grow all over their lawn. Like it looked, you know, it was everywhere this year, like, you know, and then it went to seed and then it was, you know, all over the neighborhood. And so I think there's a difference, and the education factor that was brought up in the bylaw, I think is very important, because I think that sometimes the community can think that, well, I'll just, you know, let clover grow and it will, you know, replace my lawn. But that's a different scenario from planting clover as a lawn. Clover doesn't grow in the same heights. It's varied heights. It requires seeding every couple years. It's susceptible to pests. It gets fungus from black patch is a common disease of it. People that have children, you know, neighbors, that there's a large number of bees. I love bees, but I mean, it depends on the amounts. If there's allergies in the neighborhood, at the flowering state, the clover can, you know, cause headaches, nausea, rash for some people. So we're going into different grounds here, and I do appreciate the good clover can do, and I mean, they use it in crops and in, you know, to, you know, better drainage in fields and mixed with crops and such, but it will be quite the experiment in newer neighborhoods if people choose to grow strictly clover lawns, and at least with the 15 centimeter trimming, we're avoiding some of those variables of the seeding and the you know, and the allergens and things that can come from it. This whole process essentially started because of neighbors complaining about other neighbors that had clover growing too long. So it'll be interesting to see if people start planting it at front lawns, how much more contentious situations will happen in the community. If people love clover, I don't see a problem with them, you know, growing it in boxes where, you know, and you can decide if you want to reseed it again after it's there for a while or whatever. But we have I believe here, a miscommunication of how strong or how resilient clover lawns are. If they're just, you know, made that way from the beginning, they aren't even great for foot traffic. You'll have mud some springs and so on. So this is a difficult one. I would probably like to do an amendment to the, you know, using it as a full lawn, because I even have more information to back that up. But at this point, it's a good bylaw overall, except for that. So that's all I'll say. Thanks.
All right, I see no one with their hands up. Probably all waiting till amendment time. So who made this motion? Councillor Killick, did you? Yeah. All right, anything to close?
I think it gives, we discussed that we can make this bylaw for St. Albert. And we don't run afoul of the provincial legislation, which addresses the two specific types of weeds. And will clear a path forward, I think, to give our bylaw enforcement the tools that they need to manage the most common nuisance weeds that we have discussed earlier in our question and debate.
All right, I'll call for the vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Councillor Killick, second reading.
That bylaw 30/2024 be read a second time.
Awesome. Okay, Councillor Jolly, I'm going to go to you for amendments.
That bylaw 3024 be amended by deleting section 2D in its entirety and replacing it with the following 2D, adding the following definition as a subsection. V, weed means a noxious or prohibited noxious weed is defined in the Weed Control Act.
Perfect. All right, before I accept that amendment, any questions on that? Councillor Hughes, your check mark's still up.
Actually, I
Not a
just want to be
question.
clear. This is so that we remove everything except for noxious weeds, just so I'm absolutely clear what we're voting on. We're taking only noxious weeds as the prohibited. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Alberta definitions. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. All right. Oh, Councillor Killick, a question?
So all of the other information that we've got where it calls dandelions and all of those other things that I read off the government list, those would be okay now. We could have front yards with dandelions and chickweed and I don't know, foxtail, all of those kind of common weeds would now be, if this goes through those would be okay.
It would be my understanding that they would be allowed, but they would need to be at 15 centimeters, correct?
No, if the
Okay.
motion goes through, those weeds do not have to stay at the 15-centimeter height. If this motion goes through, those weeds could grow as high and as long as they want.
Okay, Councillor Jolly, I see no more questions, so I'll accept your amending motion. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with disagreeing with Aaron. I think they're only going to go as high as they want if someone takes scissors to the grass in their front yard instead of a lawnmower, because there is that requirement to keep your lawn at under 15 centimeters. And unless someone is going to go through a lot of work to maintain their dandelions, which I think is extremely unlikely, that's not going to be a problem. I also want to thank Mayor Herron for sending me the City of Lethbridge's weed kind of web page and regulations. And they do a really good job of explaining that dandelions are not considered a noxious weed and there's no regulations to control dandelions in Lethbridge. And then go on to kind of explain why foxtail is dangerous and why the city on city property cuts down foxtail. So not just on private land, but also in city land. So the reasons why I'd like to see this definition kind of changed is because it just doesn't make sense. It's going backwards. So last spring, in response to a resident complaining about dandelions on city property, Mayor Herron said dandelions are not a noxious species, and they're actually very good for our at-risk pollinators. And that's what we've heard from a couple of different residents over the last couple of days. So the definition as it is, just adding plants as weeds, is confusing because it doesn't align with those provincial definitions of problematic weeds. Because city and school board land is exempt, school board land is maintained by us. So there's already an acknowledgement that banning dandelions in particular is not sustainable. So expecting residents to do something that the city is not willing to do is really contradictory. And it's also not going to reduce the number of dandelions in the city because it's, public land is still going to be full of them. Encouraging folks to use herbicides goes against the principles in both our own strategic plan and the principles in our MDP, because that's really how you have to maintain dandelions in particular. Dandelions are one of the most common foods, so could easily be justified as a food crop. I would say making them exempt from this. This is dandelion that my family harvested last year, and my partner roasted the roots, and he drinks this all the time. So this is something that was grown in my yard, where I can make sure it's not full of pesticides. You know, these plants support pollinators. So Ada Mustafik emailed us. She's a resident who's a certified organic gardener, and she gave us a long list of reasons why dandelions are beneficial. And she shared information about No Mow May, which is an initiative of the Nature Conservancy of Canada that encourages people to refrain from mowing their lawns during the entire month of May. Their goal being to support pollinators. So looking at dandelion, clover, and violets, so allowing those as foods. I'm going to speak to dandelions again, is they support wildlife as an important food. I know a lot of people who eat chickweed as well. That's not something that I eat, but that's a really common food as well. They aerate the soil, they improve soil conditions, they prevent soil erosion, and they improve water quality, whereas using herbicides actually makes our water quality worse. So I don't disagree that dandelions are a common complaint, but what this bylaw amendment does is it does nothing for getting rid of them because they're all over our parks, and that's not going to change, but it sets us back in terms of educating people about the harmful impacts of herbicides and lawn watering, really, because these plants are helping us have more sustainable kind of outdoor spaces. So those are my opening comments, Mayor. I've got quick closing comments, just FYI, kind of regardless of how this is going to go.
Councillor, I don't know who went first, sorry. Councillor Bermansky, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, through the mayor. There's no argument that we don't have a shortage of dandelions in St. Albert. They do grow everywhere, and the fact is most people don't use herbicides for them anymore. The city focuses on cutting them at the stage before they seed, so they're not using herbicides on them as well. And my concern, if you're allowing them on front lawns, is it might encourage more people to use herbicides because they'll be flowing into their neighbors' yards who don't want them there. I understand, you know, people like to use them for food source, but you can go, you know, I have tons of flowers in my yard, and I could grow all the dandelions in the world in my backyard. I probably couldn't eat as many as I could grow in my backyard, but it's different when you're sort of putting that on the whole neighborhood, because they do seed, and that's not a choice of everyone. So I truly believe that as a food source or as other means of using the dandelion for the good reasons, there's alternative ways, and you can still have dandelions in your lawn, just cut them when proper. That's my comment.
Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just to delete section 2D with the definition of the weed, to limit it just to noxious and prohibited weeds. I understand that is the kind of the first step, and if we eliminate that whole section, we eliminate the ability to have the listing of common weeds, as I've heard from lots of residents. It would just allow things like dandelions to be grown in your neighbor's yard. I think the unintended consequence on my yard is that I'd be using some kind of a broadleaf, 2,4-D or weed out or glyphosate or whatever the heck they call that to kill those weeds in my yard, and that would probably be pretty common unintended consequence in many other areas. So if we allow it, I think we run the risk of having way more higher usage of herbicides, not less. I think generally people would also residents would continue to complain. And our poor bylaw folks would be incredibly frustrated that they would have they'd have to go out, talk to the person and have no way of enforcing anything. So kind of sets us up for, I think, more frustration, not only between neighbors but also kind of doesn't give bylaw enforcement the tools that they would need. In terms of what we do on the city land, we have so many dandelions on our sports fields and common areas and boulevards. I think we have lots and lots of dandelions available for butterflies and bees and all other kinds of things. So I think by eliminating this section as proposed in this amendment, really takes away a tool that we need and that would be welcomed by the majority of residents in St. Albert.
Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think Councillor Killick, I addressed some of my comments, and there's no doubt that the dandelion, when it was introduced, it was certainly introduced for all the reasons as outlined by Councillor Jolly, whether it was as a food source or whether it was medicinal or whether it had other benefits into like our food source, but or our like with our bees and other animals. But I see this original bylaw as a good compromise. It allows municipal enforcement to actually address some of the concerns that some residents may have in relation to some properties that just would not meet anybody's standards. And by compromise, it also allows anybody who is looking at using dandelions for a food or medicinal source still to maintain that. And they just have to maintain it at something that meets the community standards. So that's why I'm not going to support you, Councillor Jolly, but I do support the original bylaw intent.
Kind of sad to hear some of the comments. Honestly, I thought this council was a little bit more forward thinking. I'm looking at City of Edmonton. I just Googled dandelion. The city embraces our natural environment. Dandelions are part of our natural backdrop and our early food source for wildlife and pollinators. They do not do anything. They talk about how you can, if you don't want them, how you can control them through mowing and seeding your lawn, but they do not vilify them. Strathcona, and these are our neighbors. Strathcona has a responsibility to enforce the Weed Control Act in an effort to limit the spread of noxious weeds. Dandelions are not listed as a noxious weed, period. That's all they say. I think this is about a lack of education in the public and going back to a 1950s view of what your front lawn should look like. We are a different community and a different society now. And I think honestly, it would make it simpler for our bylaw if they just could fall back on what the Alberta government calls noxious and not permitted weeds, and keep them under control and teach people, educate people on how to keep those weeds out of your lawn if you don't want them, but to also embrace what your neighbors are trying to do to help and improve their environment. And you know, in all our yards, there's so many things that were introduced that were not native to Alberta. You know, half of my plants are probably, you know, were from Europe, including some of the grasses, as Councillor Jolly pointed out. So what is beautiful to one person is ugly to another, but it's up to the individual on what their yard should look like. And, you know, I thought we could be a little bit more open. The only 2 emails we had to us were in favor of Councillor Jolly's amendments. I haven't heard anything against. And when you hear against, I think it's funny that you brought up that email, Councillor Jolly, but there is an easier solution when people start complaining about dandelions to educate and talk about, you know, the problem we have with bees and pollinators, population declining, etc. It's Councillor Jolly, I'm supportive of your amendment. I'll let you close.
Thank you. And, you know, I think it really is that education piece that's the challenge. So, you know, like Mayor Heron said, it's not 1950s anymore. And kind of there's an understanding that, you know, these plants have a place in our ecosystems. I'll just end up with some comments from the St. Albert Gardening Facebook group. So Alex Skilton Douglas posted that one year her husband decided to tackle the dandelion problem. It took 2 years for them to return and for my garden to have pollinators again. Teresa Rolick commented that she eats them, flower fritters, dandelion jelly, roots roasted for a hot drink, and they're the first food for pollinators before trees flower. And Ada, who emailed all of us, she in this group commented that changing the culture of seeing dandelions as a problem that needs to be dealt with, but rather a herbaceous perennial flower with great benefits to people, animals, and the environment is a global shift that is happening. You know, this speaks to what you spoke to, Mayor. And she says we shouldn't be an exception here in St. Albert. You know, in an online post, I joked that, you know, we should forget about less pressing issues like climate change or affordability. And really that these big issues pale in comparison to the threat of dandelions. And, you know, I said that, I said that to kind of bring to light that this is not what I want municipal enforcement to be spending time on. This is not what I want to be, you know, I want them to, you know, when someone calls about dandelions, I want them to be able to say, it's like, these are not a problem. Here's some information about dandelions. Here's some information about how you can keep them off your lawn if you don't like them. You know, this new definition is really bizarre to me. Because this, you know, a couple of these plants, chickweeds and dandelions in particular, they're featured in every wild food book I own. And really it's a staple in my family's spring salads, and yeah, in my tea cupboard. So it would be great to have this updated so that we're I guess in line with our other municipalities in Alberta and not the outliers. Thanks.
Okay, that is closing argument, so I will, oops, sorry, call for the vote. All right, that motion fails with Councillor Broadhead, Jolly, and Mayor Heron in favor. So Councillor Jolly, did you have another one you wanted to introduce, or are we back to the original?
I'd like to remove dandelion from that list of definitions. So I don't know if Marta, you have wording for that?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
And Marta sent out a different definition for weed. Did you see that one, Councillor Jolly?
Yes, that just takes out the definition, that just takes out the word dandelion essentially. So that is what Councillor Jolly is asking for.
Did you see that, Natalie?
No, but that sounds good. I don't know if someone can put that in the chat or it's just in my email.
She sent it at 2:12 p.m. today. Yeah. Do you see it? Better lower my check mark.
Yeah, I see it here. The email will load. So that bylaw 30/2024 be amended by deleting section 2D in its entirety and replacing it with the following 2D, adding the following definition as a subsection. V, weed means A, noxious or prohibited noxious weed is defined in the Weed Control Act, or B, a plant that's commonly known as a weed, including but not limited to chickweed and stinkweed, but does not include clover, provided the clover is planted in such a way that it's contained within a defined flower bed, shrub bed, or container such a plant or barrel or pot, or planted as a lawn alternative and kept under the grass height standard set in section 5.2.
And that achieves your goal, Councillor Jolly?
It's better than nothing.
Okay. Mike and Sheena, can you take down your X's just so I know what's going on here? And Ken, you have a question?
Yeah, just to administration. I mean, your interpretation of just removing dandelion as a descriptor of a nuisance weed, but if it would still hold that if an enforcement officer went out to somewhere and there was a dandelion that was 17 centimeters tall, it would still breach the community standards bylaw.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, see no more questions. I'll accept that amendment. Councillor Jolly, go ahead.
Thank you. And this really just speaks to the education piece, just making sure that we're not encouraging kind of definitions that are not in line with kind of modern views of plants. That's all. So I just want to make sure that education piece is, we're not kind of moving backwards. That's all.
Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did a quick little online survey and asked whether dandelions should be allowed as a replacement for lawns. And use the Facebook tool just to do a quick one-day survey, and had about 200 comments. Half of them were, or 3/4 of them were saying, no, we don't want dandelions in our to be a replacement for lawns. Of the other 25%, it was quite interesting, actually. I learned something, that there was strong support for clover as an alternative for pollinating, but still half of that 25% said no to dandelions in lawns. If people want to grow dandelions in a garden bed, so that there's not pesticides on them and they're contained in such a way that they don't go to seed, in a garden environment, where it would be contained in and nice and clean, and people can use it for their salads or whatever. My wife drinks dandelion tea. I've tried it, not for me, but so I just looking at residents' feedback and admitting absolutely Facebook may not be all residents, but it's a good indicator of people's feelings or beliefs, that dandelions are still seen as a weed. They're defined by the Alberta government as a weed in their weed selector tool under common weeds. They are clearly stated as a nuisance weed. They're listed in the Alberta booklet publication as a common weed. I don't know what more we need to do. I think we've trained or educated people. I think that they can phone bylaw and have people come out and say, hey, you can't have a yard full of dandelions. In particular, when they go to seed, I think people have seen it in the parks, that within 1 or 2 days of them going to seed, they sprout up way beyond, the flower grows on a stalk way beyond 15 centimeters, and that happens in 1 or 2 days. And then the seeds bloom and they spread all over the neighborhood. So I think we're going to create more problems by not having a clear definition that would have an impact on our bylaw enforcement, and I think would also impact challenges between neighbors. They already kind of point to the park and say, how come the dandelions are blowing from the park into my yard that I've worked so hard to try and keep common weed or nuisance weed free. So and by being silent on it, it still would fall under the list of common weeds, just like everything else. So I don't think that this actually accomplishes what we're hoping it would. We leave in chickweed, we leave in stinkweed. They are common nuisance weeds, not prohibited, noxious, or noxious. They are common nuisance weeds. We should just leave that definition of dandelion in there as it is stated in all the other documentation that is available. So I think this, by removing the word dandelion, is in fact leaving it more ambiguous than if we left it in as originally proposed.
Anyone else on debate? Anything to close, Councillor Jolly?
Yeah, just really briefly, I'd say Councillor Killick, you did a really good job of kind of demonstrating how much misinformation is out there, on Facebook and in other places. And I'd encourage everybody to, sit down with Ada. She's brilliant and she's a resident that kind of really understands how, these kind of this misinformation campaign against weeds has really impacted municipalities everywhere and impacted people's experience of their community. So, I would like to see us kind of be leaders in terms of kind of encouraging folks to become more educated, and that's why this particular word I would love to see struck from the bylaw. Thank you.
Call for the vote. And that motion passes with Councillor Killick, Mackay, and Bermansky opposed. All right, amendments are over. Councillor Killick, this was your original motion, right? Second reading? Okay, going back to you.
That bylaw, oh,
You already read it in, and we're just, now it's as amended.
as amended.
Yeah, yeah,
Bylaw 30/2024 be read a second time as amended.
perfect. Okay, anything else on this, guys? All right, call for the vote. And that motion passes with Councillor Killick and Bermansky opposed, and third reading. Anyone?
We just need to do unanimous consent first.
Oh, right, we got that because it's 3 readings.
Want me to,
Councillor Broadhead?
again?
Pardon?
I'm happy to do it, Mayor, if you like.
Okay,
That unanimous consent be given for consideration of third reading of bylaw 30/2024.
all right, call for the vote on that. Just waiting for you, Mike. Okay. All right, we do not have unanimous consent to go to third reading, so that'll be scheduled for December 17th. Third reading. Okay. We are on to, there was no emergent items, but we do have 2 councillor motions. Councillor Hughes, let's go with your first one on front ending.
Mayor, could we take just a 5-minute break?
Sorry, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Thank you.
It's 3:17 where you guys are, right? Okay, we'll come back at 3:25.
Where'd you go tonight, Bobby? Lois, sorry, I keep forgetting to bring that dress back. The day was a total bust anyway. Second Broken Hill in a week. That is a very expensive habit you got there. Guess I know what to ask Santa for. Okay, I'm asking Santa for.
All right, is everyone back in their chairs? I see Wes's.
Positions now, Mayor.
I'm here, Mayor. I'm just pouring some water for tea.
Okay. I see Councillor Kai. Awesome. Okay, I have majority in front of me, so we're good. Is Councillor Hughes not back?
She is.
Okay, perfect. Yay. I hope I'm not rushing everybody, but I will be leaving the meeting at about 5 minutes to 6 my time, so that's 5 to 4 your time. And I'm thinking we'll be done, but if not, Councillor Romansky, I'm sure is capable of taking you through the last couple motions. So Councillor Hughes, I'll get you to read in your first notice of motion.
I really hope this does not take 35 minutes to finish these two. So
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
that by Q2 2026 administration draft or amend a council policy for council's approval related to the city's position on front ending the costs of development, outlining the circumstances under which the city will consider front ending costs of development, and that administration explore solutions to enable and encourage developers to front end costs of development, including by researching what has been done in other municipalities in Alberta, and present recommendations to council by Q2 2026. I feel it's a little repetitive, but I think we got the deadline definitely put in there.
Okay. Before I accept it, we'll open up for questions, and I'm gonna quickly start. Mr. Fletcher, we have the offsite levy city front ending prioritizing criteria policy. Would an amendment to that policy be more appropriate to kind of achieve when we would front end, when we wouldn't, those kind of things? Because we've talked about this, thinking that this is a gap in our city, but I'm just wondering if that's the better approach.
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it is possibly one of the solutions. I think at the end of the day, we understand the intent is to establish that front ending. So it might be by virtue of that, it might be by virtue of something new as we walk through and do the analysis. And I think
Okay.
it allows us that flexibility to come back to you with a recommendation.
Okay, so you're interpreting this motion to either allow an amendment to an existing policy or draft a brand new one. And I see Councillor Hughes is open to that as well. Okay, that's the only question I had. Yeah.
Yeah, it says draft or amend a council policy. So all I care about is give me a solution, how you
Oh,
want it there. I'm leaving completely open-ended.
Sorry, you're right. It says that right in your motion. Okay. Anyone else have any questions before I accept Councillor Hughes's intended motion? Seeing nothing, I'll accept it. Go ahead, Sheena.
Sure, thank you. So this is just, well, actually, this is not just anything. I know that administration's been working on a policy to determine for front ending, and this is to ensure that it does come forward next year and to make sure that it's on their priority list, and that's the intention behind this. Regardless of what happens with the decision for the Northeast servicing, especially even if it's approved, developers have to understand that there's no more room on our credit card to put major projects, especially when we're competing with all the other priorities that does involve debt. So what we need to do is have a solution where there's an opportunity for the front of the offsite levies to be front-ended easier from developers, to make sure that we try to find another solution that doesn't just involves the city being pressured into front-ending the offsite levies, and that the expectations are clear. I think that the development community, the one thing that developers would really like is clarity, so that they know what they're trying to work around and how they're going to achieve it, and so that they can do planning, because they are ultimate long-term planners. They buy a piece of property and they invest in it for decades before they actually see the fruition of everything that they're planning. So this is about really making sure that we have a policy that we need, and we have direction for when and how we would be front-ending any type of, and that's not to say that we will not be front-ending, but we have the guidelines that we know when and under what circumstances the city would be expected to front-end. So that it's not just a default of expectation that the city would be front-ending everything all the time. We just don't have the debt limit to do that, even if we had the will to do it. That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I firmly believe every time we study a situation, we only get stronger as a result. So I believe that this motion will take the city through a process of taking a look not only at what we currently have as policies, but what is out there to perhaps inform us for improvements, and to Councillor Hughes's point, clarity to the development industry. So certainly support this.
Okay. I see no one else weighing in. I think if this motion passes today, we're gonna have to have a maybe committee of the whole or some sort of conversation, because there might be difference of opinion on this council. Some might say let's front end everything and some might say let's front end nothing. So we're gonna have to give guidance to administration before they go ahead and start drafting something that they don't know where we sit. But I think this is a good first step. So anything to close, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, this is actually going to be a problem for the next next council, not necessarily us, in fact, because it's not till 2026. The reason that I put that forward is what administration was planning to do as well in their work plan, and that there's not an expectation for more servicing requests between now and 2026 is the expectation, at least, unless we have a surprise. So just so we understand that timeline, but ultimately, even if you wanted to do it, we just don't have $330 million to front end things. And so we have to have some kind of parameters so that we have that guidance, or the next council has that guidance. That's it. Thank you.
All right, call for the vote. That one passes unanimously. All right, Councillor Hughes, your next one is MDP amendments.
So based on the backgrounder, Mayor, like there's two areas in the backgrounder. So
yeah, I was gonna split the motion no matter what you did. So
the first part, I'm not going to bring forward the full motion as is because apparently it can't be achieved. But the first part of the motion is that the MDP is amended by April 1st, 2025 to define priority areas, areas for growth, and future areas of growth. I think that would be the end of part one, right? I guess, well, and my question, I guess, to administration is, can I finish that off to say to provide clarity that the MDP will permit growth in the newly annexed land? Would that be the end of it at the comma, or?
I think the MDP already does permit growth in the newly annexed land. It just has to be in the priority growth areas, right?
I just wanted to have that for absolute clarity. So
yeah,
if we ended it there, is that where the contradiction begins, or where does the issue begin?
Without understanding the impacts of growth and development in all areas or outside of the priority areas, it would be, this is where planning and development would caution council moving forward that way without understanding and without studying the impacts and what you're asking for. It's essentially enabling a bunch of planning or requesting a bunch of planning work to be done in a non-prioritized manner.
Okay, so because it says the first action is to do that, to define them. But if the definition is that you can't grow there, then that does not help with the end goal here. So I'm trying to, if you come back with the three areas that say you can't grow there, then we're even more pigeonholed than before. So I guess I'm asking, is there an issue to provide clarity that the MDP will permit growth in newly annexed land? The second part of the motion is revising the MDP, and I'm prepared to put that forward. But I'm just trying to figure out part one and where the period begins.
I think Christina's question is, what is your end goal, Councillor Hughes? To define priority areas and future, though that's not a bad thing to have good, clear definition. But if your intention is to allow growth to go in every direction, then that's a completely different conversation.
Maybe I could just offer a quick comment. I apologize, but I think if we look at splitting it, and I certainly stand to be corrected by the experts on either side of me, but the definitions in and of themselves, without an alteration to the MDP, define those areas, but don't change the scope and the scale or the forecast growth across those priority components. And so there will be development in the annexed lands between now and 50 years from now, as an example, right? And so that on its own doesn't alter, I think, the approach. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Christina or Adrian, on that. But if we split it, those definitions would be applied to the MDP as it exists today, just clarifying those three areas, defining them. The second part is more fundamental. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. It should be noted, though, that Flourish only looks at growth for approximately 25 years and up to 100,000 people. So adding additional lands
into priority areas, including any newly annexed lands, even portions of that would change the growth projections and assumptions and timelines associated with development.
Okay, so if we're going to define it, but we still have, so you're basically saying though that priority areas would be developable in the next 25 years because the MDP is for 25 years.
So when we're reviewing this motion and when we were discussing this motion, if council or Councillor Hughes would like to change which areas are priority, we would still want to go back and study that and the implications. We'd be looking at maybe moving some areas that are currently listed as a priority growth area and exchanging them for other areas. So we would want to know what the impacts would be, which is why it is a little bit more complicated than just enabling, unfortunately.
Okay, so what
You
is,
know, I was gonna split it, where I was gonna ask it to be split was after the word in the new, or after the words newly annexed land, comma. So that was my proposal.
to
if you
permit
read it.
growth in the newly annexed land? Is that what you were suggesting, Mayor?
Yes, so that, amend the MDP to define priority areas for growth of future areas of annexation to provide clarity that the MDP will permit growth in the newly annexed lands, which it does already, but that's where I was going to split it. It's the part about the Northeast servicing that I was having a hard time with.
Okay, I'm just trying to think if the end result of that motion is going to create a document that I'm even further away from what I would like to see in the end. I think that actually, Mayor, I would like to not bring forward that portion and just bring forward the alternative one. But here's my question to the alternative one that's being brought forward is why do we need to do a business case? Like the suggestion is to say, develop a business case, and why would we need a business case versus just amend to do the MDP for the $450,000? What additional benefits are we going to receive from that?
I think because that'll if this alternative is going to achieve what you're trying to achieve, it's completely rewriting our MDP.
Yep.
Yeah, so that requires $1 million, 800,000 or something. So we need to have a business case on that.
Okay, so to that, I'm going to look to either of you. What's in our MDP right now, but other than the map, that would actually prevent the north from being developed? Because apparently it's all over the MDP, but I don't remember recognizing that when we approved it. So are there any examples of how this is so interwoven that it requires a $500,000 rewrite?
So what it is the underpinning documents of the MDP to understand where growth and development will occur and re-looking and reprioritizing that. Then we would go in. So fundamentally, it looks like it's just a map, but the map has a lot of information and data behind it. There's also quite a few within the sustainable growth section of the MDP. There are quite a few policies that talk about how growth and development will occur. We would look at our infill strategy as well, what our priorities are with that. Adrian, do you have anything else to add?
Okay, I'll bring forward alternative one then.
Okay, to read that one in.
That administration develop a project charter, evaluate the organizational impact for the strategic direction, include the budget request for council's consideration by April 1st, 2025. Feel free to do it sooner if you can, so that the MDP will permit growth in the newly annexed land, including recognizing the catchment areas applicable to the Northeast Servicing Project Charter as areas for growth instead of future areas for growth.
All right, any questions on that alternative one, guys?
Yeah, I do, Mayor Herron, sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm having thumb problems here. Does that come with a A financial ask?
Yeah. Well, this won't be a financial ask. The financial ask will come in April 1st.
Yeah, I'm just saying, so the project charter can be done internally by planning?
It will be, it will have to reprioritize other projects though, to enable it to happen.
So there will be a cost.
There's an opportunity cost, certainly, right? Not a cost, internal resources, but yes, that will come at the expense of something else in terms of a delay.
But I'm assuming that the alternative motion was put forward by administration. So you feel that that timeline then is achievable with what you just said?
To develop a project charter for this, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess just in terms of the wording of this motion, are we directing administration to kind of change the priority out growth areas? Is that kind of the intent, or is it just? I guess this question is to Councillor Hughes. I don't know if you're going to go into this in debate. I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, I agree that it needs to be included in the MDP, but I'm not sure about directing a certain focus kind of without all that background research.
So, I think that, and it's a fair question, Councillor Jolly. The intention is not to pick a favorite direction. Edmonton doesn't, Spruce Grove doesn't, every other community I look at doesn't pick a direction unless they're bound by a lake, river, or other mountain or something. This is about just actually allowing us to potentially grow in two directions and to not put as a barrier to say that you can't grow to the northeast. So it's apparently, to accomplish this, we have to do a full MDP rewrite. And I'm not going to sit here and argue with administration about that, because fighting City Hall, you'll never win. But this isn't about picking a favorite child. It's about having two children.
But I guess my question to this, Peter, would be, if this passes and we see that that business case, would it talk about kind of the impacts of kind of allowing growth wherever or prioritizing growth wherever? Do you think that's something that would be included in that business case?
No, so what would, through the chair, the response would be just to develop a project charter for everyone to understand the scope and the extent of what we would be looking at to evaluate the new growth direction within the MDP, but it wouldn't have any recommendations with it.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, any more questions? Seeing none, I'll accept your motion, Councillor Jolly.
Oh, it's me, but it's okay.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah.
It's okay. I understand what you meant. Okay, so I understand that this is different from the original intention, because apparently it will take more work than what was initially planned to allow the north to also be developed. I don't remember when we voted in favor of this that there was an indication that the north would not be allowed to be developed until all the west was developed. There was a discussion about priority, but then the developers in the north even commented and said, it looks like it's going to be stalling our ability to develop. And we were assured that they were not going to have that situation. But a month ago, it was clear that even though it says case by case, the answer was no. And so what it looks to be is that the north is not to be developed until the west is fully built out. Now, the challenge is that 10 years ago, we allowed the north to continue to grow. We allowed Jensen Lakes to go and Aaron Ridge North to grow when we have approved area structure plans to allow that development to occur. And the fact is that there's servicing required to let those developments complete. There's also the fact that the north, regardless of where we think just ideologically, with an ideology of which way you want to grow to the west, the north already has momentum. There's a convenience factor of being able to get easily onto the trail, and there's just simply a momentum with the commercial, et cetera. So what that means is that if we say we're stalling this now for decades, we're literally stopping it for decades. Even if this other development that we just approved a month ago does go forward, if there's no ability for servicing to occur, it's going to be approved and then moving nowhere. So what is key here is that we allow development to occur where the benefiting lands for the Northeast servicing are. So wherever the catchment area is for that Northeast servicing, as a city, we should not be saying no growth there, in light of the fact that that catchment area needs to be serviced in order for the development, the ASPs that have been approved to be able to move forward. Unfortunately, that is not what's been happening. We now have had it where it's been going to a stall and it's like, it's okay if it doesn't move forward. And honestly, it's not. In my opinion, it absolutely is not okay that we're saying no growth to the north, recognizing the fact that there is already growth to the north, and that prior to the MDP, the north was a priority growth area. And then suddenly it got changed. And personally, that was not what I voted for when we agreed to the MDP, to say that we're not allowing it. And it's gone from a priority to the only priority in the MDP, or at least it's how it's being interpreted. So should we continue to grow to the west and develop the lands to the west? Absolutely. And we've already put that money into that, and that commitment and that risk. But what we have also need to do is recognize that there is already a wave going to the north, and it's really not, it should not be our position to try to stop it from happening. There's no reason that I can see why we can't go to two directions at the same time. Edmonton is growing on St. Albert's border, and it's growing to the south, and it's growing to the west, and they don't say one direction only. I look at other cities, and they are growing well past 1.6% a year on average, and they're not worried about their ability to manage it. So this is just about providing, at this point, we're not even approving anything. We're just saying, build us a project charter and tell us what it'll cost to do this. And then we'll make a decision on April 1st about whether or not we want to move forward. So this is, of all of the things that we can do, this is the least of actual changing anything. This is just kicking some tires and saying, please let us know what it will cost. From what I understand from the background, we're looking about $450,000. Am I happy about that number? No. But apparently that's the number that's going to be coming forward. This is going to be also a decision of the next council of exactly what that new MDP looks like, even if this does pass, because it's not going to be done anytime soon. But I don't see how we can say stop all growth to the north and just not recognize the consequences of that decision. So this is about simply just allowing the project charter to go forward, to then discuss how much it's going to cost, and then decide if it's worth continuing to move forward. I really think that this is something that needs to be done. I don't throw away $500,000 lightly. But the other thing you have to recognize is that, and for reasons I don't know, when the MDP was done at the same time as the annexation land, there was no consideration of the annexation land. There was no consideration of the priority schedule. When we asked residents, which way do you want to build? We didn't put the annexation land in there, even in a hypothetical amount, and then said, which way do you want to build, knowing that the north was tapped out. And so then there was a, don't worry about it, we'll do an update. Okay, we did an update, but we didn't review whether or not the strategy needed to be changed after the annexation was completed. We got a whole bunch more land, and we just said, here's a map that reflects it, but we're not changing our priorities in spite of the fact that we have an enormous amount of land ahead of us. We're not even going to now continue to allow to grow to the north, recognizing that. And that's disappointing. So what we've basically have done is we built the MDP prematurely from the annexation land, unfortunately, and we have not updated it to reflect the annexation land. And to do it right appears to cost about $450,000. What we did before was we did not reflect on the opportunities that we were also losing by saying we're tapping out the north for decades. And we will be losing a great deal of momentum. We will be losing a great deal of confidence in the development community. If they believe that halfway through a development, we will not only not fund it, which has yet to be decided, but we will also not allow any growth to occur to help anyone else fund it either. That basically means if the servicing doesn't move forward, the development doesn't move forward. So council, this is a minimal amount of direction at this point. I'm sure that the development community would appreciate a lot more direction because they still will not have that definite direction for 2 more years, even if this passes and even if the project charter goes forward. That will give them confidence that if they want to purchase land, especially the land that would be applicable to the Northeast servicing for $70 million that someone's going to have to take on, that they will even be recommended for approval. Because at this point, it looks like they'll be recommended against approval until the MDP is changed. And so I ask you, if you were a developer and you had to purchase land and you thought that no matter what you did, you were going to have that MDP used as a reason for why that you should not be allowed to move forward in development, would you buy that land? And would you actually go to the millions of dollars and years of investment, knowing that the answer is we recommend against it? And yet we have a half serviced area and we have a catchment area that does not reflect the servicing area. So, or the catchment area does not reflect the ability to develop to finance that servicing costs. I guess that would be the correct term. So I'm asking council, please, let's just go for the next step and figure out how much it's going to cost and the consequences of it. And then we'll decide how to move forward in the spring. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe that if we had servicing available today in the pre-annex land, we wouldn't be having this conversation because we would have land available to develop in our current lands. Problem is that we don't have any service available. And to actually allow any kind of servicing to the north, we have to put in servicing that provides servicing to the post-annex land. And so everybody is kind of twitchy about that because now it doesn't align with the MDP and perhaps it's realigning our priorities away from developing Lakeview Business District and to the west. I'm with Councillor Hughes. I want that west developed as much as the next person does. I really do. But I don't see that stopping development to the north is in St. Albert's best interest. And I understand that the only way that we can continue to allow growth to the north, even in the pre-annexation lands, is to provide servicing to that land because we don't have any today. So how do we do that? If we're going to provide any servicing at all, we have to go the whole 9 yards. But does that take away our priorities for developing Lakeview Business District? Personally, I hope not, because we need that land to the west for sure. But if we stop it to the north, I think the cost, irrespective of the money going out the door, the cost to St. Albert is too high to bear. We are missing an opportunity here, and opportunity doesn't knock every day. And so when there is momentum to the north and momentum to the west, let's embrace it all. And I am confident, quite honestly, that St. Albert can do this. We're a world-beating city, and we just need to act like it. And to that end, I hope that this interim step that defines how we're going to do business will pass. And then come April or June or whenever it comes before council, we'll have the cost before us. And then we can start to measure, okay, this is what's going to take. Are we willing to bite that? Are we willing to take it on? And at that time, we'll say either yay or nay. But anyway, Councillor Hughes, you have my support. Thank you.
Anyone else on debate? My only thoughts are, the motion says, so the MD will permit growth in the newly annexed land, including those recognized in the catchment areas applicable to the Northeast Servicing Project as areas for growth. They are identified in the Northeast as green as areas for growth. It's the pink, which is quite far west and north, that is future growth. So it's a little, I'm assuming planning staff knows the intention, but they're already identified as areas of growth. I think this is a little premature, quite honestly. I think we spent years and years developing this MDP with a ton of public engagement, and I don't want to throw that out yet. And I would like to delay this decision till we know what we're doing with the area structure plan and the northeast servicing. That's why Councillor Hughes' previous motion on prioritizing of front ending was a good one. But for me, if the northeast servicing fails, then it's up to the development community to come to the table with the money to build that line. And I'm okay with doing the area structure plan. I'm just kind of worried about the money and the servicing. But I do not want to rewrite the MDP at this point. I think we're jumping a little bit too far ahead with this motion. We've already been told that if we approve both those, the area structure plan and the northeast servicing, that admin will be coming forward with a request to amend the MDP. So let's take this in the right order and the right steps. I really honestly, I can truly say that I have not had a single conversation really with how any one of you are voting in the next couple of weeks on those two big decisions. So I think we should actually let the process fall out, see what EMRB says, and see how we feel about spending another $70 million. But there are huge implications. If we allow growth to go in every direction, which is what we've done in the past, that means we have to buy buses for every direction. We have to buy fire halls in every direction. And that is the unsustainable growth that we tried to curtail in the MDP. We were very deliberate in why we were choosing Lakeview and the community Medi site as the immediate priority areas of growth. The rest is all future. Councillor Hughes to close.
Thank you, Mayor. Here's the deal. I didn't want to do this. If administration said they could revise the MDP without doing the 2-year thing, I was all for it. I was for doing it on the original motion. I was informed through multiple pages that can't be done. So if the Northeast Servicing does come forward, I must suspect that will come forward before April 1st. And administration will also be saying, we want you to do a full MDP rewrite at 450,000. If they can come back on March 1st and say, we can do the MDP rewrite because Northeast Servicing's been done and we can do it without having to spend 450,000, I'm all for this. So please do not think I want you to do this project. I just want you to solve the problem. The problem we have right now is that we've half built out the area to the north. We have momentum to the north. And yet if we do not allow development to occur to the north, we are stopping growth. And that what happened on November 5th with recommendation against it because the MDP indicates the MDP is not moving forward to allow that momentum to continue. Why we want to stop momentum when you have it, when you have a ball rolling, the last thing you want to do is come to a halt and then hope it starts up again. You work with what you have. When it comes to the public engagement, it was without consideration of the annexation lands. Unfortunately, the MDP, for all the time and money that was put into it, never considered the annexation lands as it was built out. And that is why we need to come back and make sure that this includes the annexation lands, that is done properly. And that ultimately, regardless of whether or not you say, okay, this is areas for growth or not, it's not being interpreted as a growth area that's going to be recommended for development in the MDP. And that is where the problem lies. And that is what we need to recognize, is that whoever takes on that $74 million worth of debt needs to have some assurances that they at least expect that all the catchment area for that will be developed before the debt comes due. Otherwise, we are putting ourselves into a tremendous risk for taxpayers, because if we can tell taxpayers that $37 million is not going to be paid off and that in 12 years' time, the full debt of the payments is going to be on their shoulders, that is unfair to them. And just doing that's its own challenge, but then saying that we are going to preclude it from being able to happen, that we're going to stop people from being able to develop there and ensure that then 12 years' time, the taxes go up dramatically to pay for this. That is extremely poor planning. And that is why we have to solve this problem. I'm hoping at least we can get to the first step, which is just a project charter, and then we'll decide. That's it. Thank you.
Call for the vote. That motion passes with Councillor Jelly and Mayor Herron opposed. Okay, I am going to sign off. Councillor Hermansky, are you good to take over as chair?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, see you guys. I'll be back Friday.
Okay, so next items on the agenda are information requests, notice of motions and announcements.
There was just one information request, I think, from Councillor Broadhead to read into the record.
Let me find it and I'll read it in.
I emailed it to you, Councillor Broadhead.
You'll forward it to me? Outstanding.
I emailed, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Given the limited in-house St. Albert planning resources and their focus priority to the development of Lakeview Business District and the St. Albert West ASB, what contracted resources are available to provide planning/engineering expertise to the city to allow the concurrent development of Northeast St. Albert? Secondly, should such planning expertise be available, would the costs of their engagement be capitalized within the overall program costs of the servicing plan for Northeast St. Albert?
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Anything else? I don't see anybody else with hand up. No. Okay, so for our last item in camera with CAO, if someone wants to put that motion forward.
Oh, I beat you. That council move in camera to have a confidential dialogue with the Chief Administration Officer pursuant to section 24(1)(a) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Okay, call for the vote. And I believe it's unanimous. I can't see all of them. Okay, thank you. So we'll adjourn this part.
No, we're not adjourning. Are we just going into the council lounge?
Somebody has to bring their computer and host.
Okay.
So,
I've got mine still on if you want to make me the host.
okay.
The most.